Hello and welcome out to a very special moment here on the channel. So, a lot of you probably watching this right now, you're probably wondering, like, what does this have to do with cards? Well, we're not talking about baseball cards, sports cards in general, because we're back with my good friend Curtis to talk about a game that you and I have just completed, Resident Evil Village. This is going to be a spoiler cast, and we're going to spoil everything. How do you think about that? What do you think about that?
It sounds good. You know,
Okay.
Collin, about let's say 4 years ago, I believe,
Yeah.
we sat down to do a spoiler recording of Resident Evil Biohazard 7, and that was a good time. And I'm excited for this because spoilers. Capcom really hit the ball out of the park on this one.
Yeah, they did.
It was a real home run.
Yeah.
On their part.
Big half-court shot for the touchdown.
I was trying to keep it baseball themed for your viewers.
I was just going to do sports in general, but that
okay.
works
Well,
too.
Unfortunately, no cards here, but Capcom, they left all of the cards on the table.
And the kitchen sink as well. No. So, I guess we just want to start. Do we want to just start with just the beginning of the game? Do we want to just do some intro thoughts?
So I think let's do, non-spoiler, just some brief general thoughts. And then we can, I think we do what we did with 7, and we just kind of go through
beat by beat,
section by section. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
There's like, let's call it five distinct sections of the game, we'll say.
Yeah, essentially.
Sort of, or maybe 6. I don't know. And yeah, I think it just kind of breaks up pretty evenly, especially compared to prior Resident Evil games, I feel.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we just do that.
Okay. So starting off with just, I guess, general thoughts. I guess even comparing 8, or I guess Village, to Biohazard, which one did you enjoy more? Did you like more of this continuation of the story? And I guess kind of to piggyback off that, do you think really Biohazard is almost like required reading to know what happens in Village?
Well, yeah. So I think like one thing about prior Resident Evil games is that the next main line, generally speaking, is not just a different setting, but usually they're a different character you're following. Typically, that's not always the case, right? Resident Evil has a pretty wide swath of characters at this point, but 7 to 8 is unique in that you're following the same core, we'll call them heroes of the story. Ethan, the Winterses, as they are known in several documents. Ethan, Mia, and now Rose. And Chris is there. Everyone remembers Chris Redfield. So it's a pretty direct continuation from 7 to 8, and that's not always been the case. There's usually callbacks and stuff, but they're not. I wouldn't necessarily think of them as direct sequels. I guess 2 to 3 is kind of the same scenario, right? Where it is like a different lead you're playing as, but it's 2 and 3 are like taking place kind of at the same time, or not just kind of, they are taking place at the same time in the same city. So like there's that kind of connection. This is a different setting, but it's a very, like, more so than in the past, I think a very, very clear, like, direct sequel. And so I cannot imagine. I mean, you could totally play Village and probably have a good time having not played 7, but I think you'd be losing out on a lot of stuff that probably wouldn't make a lot of sense to you, especially related to Ethan.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I guess not to name drop, I guess it could, but the little girl from Biohazard shows back up at the end, and I feel like people who didn't know that would be like, who is this? And
well, and I think also
the Bakers and all that.
Not that Resident Evil has never been campy. It goes back to the first game. It's always, other than maybe 6, like, it's never really been a series to take itself super seriously. And that is here in spades, as like, you're getting your hand chopped off. Right? Like, limbs are just flying at points in this game. And I think, for me, I had not played 7 since it had come out. And so there were elements of this that I had forgotten. Like, I had forgotten that in 7 that totally happens.
Yep.
And I remember it kind of took me out a little bit in this game, but I just kind of laughed it off. I was like, yep, classic Resident Evil, gotta love it. And we'll get into it later, but they go out of their way to explain that and like contextualize why that is a thing happening in this game and why Ethan can just reattach his hand, no issues. And they make it make sense in a way that I love. And I do think like if you had played 7 before, probably even more recently than I had, and you remember some of those elements in that story, like I think that stuff in this game would make a bit more sense earlier than it does. It's not until very, very end of the game where they like spell it out for you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like there's that too. But
I'm pretty sure because even recently playing the intro to 7 again, it's you can pick up your left hand in Resident Evil 7, and you can pick up your right hand in Resident Evil Village. I just find that kind of funny that it's like it is like an inventory item at that point. And whatnot. But yeah, I thought that was I feel like when that moment happened where your hand got chopped off in Village, I was thinking like oh no, are they gonna like just kill him right here? But no, he just puts it back on and he just pours some alcoholic stuff on.
That is one side effect of, again, like had not played 7 in over 4 years, where I remember thinking like in that moment, oh, what now? Like what are we gonna do next? Yeah. Like are they about to pull like the old switcheroo on us? Like is that about to happen? And it doesn't, not yet at least. But yeah, as far as the question of which of the two I prefer, I've been thinking about this a lot. I do think 8 is far more replayable. I think absolutely. It's one thing I really, really loved about the RE3 remake last year is just how I know a lot of people, don't like that remake as much. I personally love it, and one of the reasons why is just how replayable it was. I played through that remake like 7 times last year within the first couple weeks, and adored it. And partly because it was so short. Like I think its brevity, and then like combined with the challenges and the different unlockables you had, like made it really, really fun to replay. And that's one element I love in Resident Evil games is how fun it is to complete them, how fun it is to go through multiple times, doing a knife run, doing infinite ammo runs, doing the challenge, like different challenge runs, speed runs and all that. Like it's super, super fun for a variety of reasons. And so I think 8 really, really lends itself to that in a huge way. I think more so than 7 did. Yeah. At least 7, I didn't feel a huge drive to like replay it multiple times in the way that I did with 8. 7 is exactly what I wanted from Resident Evil in 2017.
That's a good way to put it.
Post 6, you and I've shared my thoughts in the past, right? Like I hate 6. I hate everything about it. 5, I don't even really like that much. And I've been wanting for a long, long time, like a return to classic Resident Evil. And 7, 99% of 7 was exactly what I wanted. It was like the thing that I had been saying for years, like this is what I want from Resident Evil. 7 was exactly that. That said, I think the more I reflect on 8 and like the direction this series could be heading in, I think 8 is like the most sensible direction. Whereas like 7, it's like you can't, obviously like I would love it, but you can't just keep making the same like. It's a mansion, it's a big house, it's a big whatever, and that's it. Like, you obviously have to move forward from that at some point. And I think 8 really sets up, like, a really good blueprint for that. We'll probably talk about that more later, but I really think, like, if they follow essentially what they have set up with 8 and just kind of expand upon it, without getting too action-y, I guess, like I think they've set themselves up really well for like the future of this franchise. So I don't know, still in the honeymoon period, but I really love 8. I love the variety on display. They're like you kind of just go through all the different types of gothic horror, as you're progressing through the game. There's just so much there. You almost get like instead of one big game where it's like, here's the mansion. You get like 4 of those in some respects, or maybe 3.5. But yeah, I just love that. So I don't know. In the honeymoon period, I think I might put 8 above 7. Just saying a lot because I was a little worried about 8, to be totally honest.
Okay.
I don't know how you felt, but from its initial reveal, I felt like it looked kind of rough.
I remember the frame rate was a big thing. Like
that,
technically...
and we knew that it was heading in more of an action direction. We knew it was going to be closer aligned to RE4.
Right.
Which I guess is funny that I'm saying now I might prefer 8 to 7 because 7 is to RE1, what RE8 is to RE4. And while I know RE4 is your favorite game ever, I'm kind of like fine on RE4. I prefer 1, so I guess it's interesting that I have this kind of opinion on it. But Collin, talk to me about what your thoughts.
Yeah.
Where would you place this between 7 and 8?
So, I mean, I think I still even preferred like 7. Like, if you gave me Resident Evil 7 and then also gave me the 2 and 3 remakes, I would still rather play Resident Evil 7 again. When it even comes to 8, I think I enjoyed 8 much more than 7. And kind of going back with the replayability stuff, like comparing Resident Evil 8 to Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4, you beat it on like the main difficulty. You got a couple weapons to unlock. You beat it on professional. You get some more extra costumes. And then you beat like separate ways and you get like another set of costumes. And then like at that point, like that's it. Like you don't really get other than like, you can run through the entire game with the laser cannon. I'm like, okay, that's cool. But you're not really trying anything else. Like you have everything. Where I feel like this game has much more to go after through the different weapon unlocks and... Yeah, there's the whole bonus shop or whatnot, like extra weapons and infinite ammo, and it just feels like you can play around a lot with it more. And even thinking about even on the replayability stuff, like I just did my speedrun playthrough of Village where I beat it in like 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And like you're not going to be able to beat Resident Evil 4 and because I mean you can't just speedrun through Resident Evil 4. I mean like you can, but you're going to be playing for a while. Where I feel like when you go to, like, the least favorite part probably of Village to me was the factory. And I feel like when I get to the factory, I have that thought of like, oh man, here we go. Here's the kind of this trudge. Where even though Resident Evil 4 is my favorite game, I still feel that way when I get to the castle. Because I'm like, when I get to the castle in 4, I'm like, okay, I better buckle in because I'm going to be here a while. Like, this is a long part of the game, is the castle. It's like the longest part of the game. And yeah, I just feel like I had much more satisfaction coming out of 8 or Village than what I did with 4. So I mean, it's almost a weird little thing where I think about like between the BioShocks. Like I think gameplay wise, like BioShock 2 is a superior game to BioShock 1 in like all aspects. But then like if you ask me which one's your favorite better game or which one you enjoy more, I would say the original. So it's kind of like with this.
Sure.
Where it's like there's a lot of things that Village does so much better than Resident Evil 4. But at the end of the day, I still think I would prefer the first one, the Resident Evil 4, before something like Village.
Well, I got good news for you. You're in that remake.
I know.
At some point.
Yeah. I'm very worried. On a side note, I'm still worried about that remake being like too serious. Like, I just hope there's like, I mean, I just think of like that line about, Leon's talking to Salazar in RE4, and Salazar is like, I've sent my right hand to deal with you. And Leon's like, your right hand comes off? It's like there better be like those kind of dumb one-liners in the 4 remake. Because if it's like all like very serious and very reserved Leon, like the Resident Evil 2 remake, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. But yeah, hopefully we get some cool stuff with that.
I feel like, I mean, I guess my hope is that, I mean, 8's pretty silly.
It gets that way, yeah.
8's pretty bonkers. And so the hope would be that like they know, right?
Like that boulder punching a-hole, like that's very, getting there.
It's very self-aware.
Yeah.
I mean, like, again, Ethan gets his hand chopped off. Moments later, takes his hand, pours the health vial, health juice over his hand, and it just kind of merges back, and his only response is, "All right, good."
Yeah.
So like, it feels like they know.
Yeah, for sure.
Only time will tell. So
Yeah.
I guess then, let's just get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair? So like, opening this game, let's talk to the first part up to the castle. So this like
Mm-hmm.
first opening section.
I call that the prologue, basically.
Prologue, sure.
Yeah.
And on a speed run, you get through it in about 10 minutes, maybe
Yeah.
15. It feels like, I don't know, it feels like maybe probably the weakest part of the game, just because like it's some stuff to trudge through. Like, so you think about your first playthrough, right? It takes a while. Like, I think it took me a while to get to the castle, maybe like an hour and a half or something the first time. And there's a part where you're at home, and there's the scene we saw in the trailers where Chris and his team come crashing in. They shoot Mia.
Mm-hmm.
They take you away. No, like, what's going on? Who knows? Is Chris evil? I don't know. And then you find yourself in the village, and so there's some exploration. There's that first very RE4 like sequence where you're kind of trapped and surrounded by a bunch of lichens. And yeah, and just some like light exploration of the village. Any like thoughts in general? I think on this prologue, specifically.
So I guess even to start at the very beginning, did you notice the like kendo
Yeah.
Easter egg thing? So that was like the only like really main reference to like the remakes in a little bit. Because like wasn't kendo like a person in the original 2 and 3 or something like that, but they fleshed him out like a little bit more.
Yeah.
People. Another side note: people were, I guess, talking about how big the baby's Rose's head was. Did you notice anything about that?
A couple comments. I feel like I want to give context for this. In games, I feel like babies typically just look super weird.
Yeah, I get that.
I thought Resident Evil 8, like, character model, I thought Rose, like, looked good. Like, I felt like it looked like a very, like, I was like, that's a cute baby. And I feel like that's not something you can say in games very much, because they usually just look super odd and weird.
Yeah. So what you're saying is the RE engine is built for babies.
Built for babies. Yep. I think I think the other thing to note specifically is that there's some documents you can find in the house where you see like the height and weight of Rose. And I think it's unclear if this is like at birth or a little while afterwards. But if it's at birth, Rose is a really big baby. Yeah. Like, if you just like look at the weight, right? It's a much heavier baby than you would expect. Which I think feeds into some theories that Rose perhaps could be rapidly aging. Which I'll just sprinkle that in, because we'll touch on that, I think, at the end of this. Just something to note.
Yeah.
If you didn't catch it. Otherwise, I think in the house, nothing too substantial.
Yeah, you can kick the ball in the other room for a trophy or whatever.
You kick the ball. It does. I do want to start. I mentioned this game has a weaker, I think gameplay-wise, a weaker start of the Resident Evil games. Generally speaking, like, I mean, 7 is great because you're just right in it. Like, it's a pretty immediate thing, right? And a lot of them tend to be. This is much more closely aligned to 4, right? But one thing I do want to note is the storybook sections, of which there are 1, I guess, or 2 technically.
2, I guess, yeah.
There is a storybook called Village of Shadows, which is also the name of the hardest difficulty in the game, that Mia is reading to Rose at the start of this game. And the best I can explain it is, if you think of the kind of like tone of, and even almost visual style of something like a Coraline, the movie from Leica, that's kind of what it reminded me of. It was more almost like a paper aesthetic. I mean, it's a book, right? So like there's a pretty cool, like, it's just super cool aesthetic. And it's definitely that like children's story that's kind of dark and creepy. And so she's reading it to Rose. We'll talk more. I think we should talk more about this towards the end. Some of the parallels in the story, but Ethan kind of makes a comment. He's like, "Hey, what? That's kind of creepy. Why are you reading that to Rose?"
Right.
We do get a hint of there's some like arguments going on between Rose and Mia, where Ethan and Rose, or Ethan and Mia. Oh my god.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Basically, so like Ethan is like kind of still dwelling on the past, and Mia's like, stop it. Like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. Doesn't really get elaborated on too much.
Yeah.
However, what we do find out later is there might be a reason for why this is happening. But that does happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you chopped my hand off, but it's fine, Ethan. We're okay, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, kind of even go back with a little bit more of the prologue. I do think it goes on a little too long. One thing I was a little let down by, like, as a horror standpoint of being like pretty easily scared by a lot of stuff, I was kind of like happy it didn't. Mm-hmm. But there's really the beginning of the game is really the only part of the game where you play during nightfall, which I thought was really interesting. Because I figured, like, after the dollhouse, like, I thought it was starting to get a little bit darker. And I guess maybe like the end of the factory, it's dark out. I guess like when you're doing the Heisenberg boss fight. But you know what I mean, right?
We'll obviously talk about those sections later, but they're clearly not intended to be like a horror section.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. I never really thought about like this is a horror game where the whole entirety of the game takes place during the day, which is actually in and of itself kind of an interesting thought. What I will say is, well, one thing that I remember my first playthrough, I was like, hold on, what? Is that... So, basically, Chris comes in, they shoot up Mia. She dead. Mm-hmm. They take you all away. They're like, no one's telling you what's going on. But you will put you in a truck, drive you off. Something happens. The truck is now sideways. Everyone there is dead. Or all the other, like, people, right? So, Rose is missing, Mia's body's gone, Chris is gone, and you're just, like, kind of laying there, there's blood everywhere, and it's night, and you're in the woods. So that's, like, your lead into the village as you're walking through the woods, and you eventually arrive to the village. What's weird is it's, like, pitch black, right? You go into this building, and you kind of go into the basement, you walk around, you open this cover, a rat flies that, like, jumps runs out. But you then turn around and walk back basically the way you came, and as you walk upstairs, or as you're, like, you're going back, you hear a crash. You walk back upstairs, there's, like, a wall that's been blown out, basically. Us, the player, we're like, oh, it's the lichens, but, Ethan's like, oh, I don't know what's happening. And then you walk outside, and it's morning. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time that was, like, it was just how much time has passed. Like
it was a little jarring for sure.
It was a little weird. Not a big deal. Yeah. There's no story reason for it. It is. Yeah. And I think it sets up for the idea of like I think back to I think it was Batman Arkham City, where it was like, oh, it's the longest night of Batman's life, and the whole game takes place over the course of one night. I think about that for this game, where it's like I think there's even a reference. Later, I think Chris makes a comment about it being like one long day. Yeah, this has all happened.
Gotcha.
But so we get to the village. There's you do some light exploration. I want to talk about the village, but I want to save it. I think like in between some sections, because it's one of my favorite aspects of this game. But you eventually, you meet up with some people. Some survivors, we'll call them, or you do have a quick run-in with this old lady, this old creepy witch lady, who makes some very like cryptic comments and just kind of vanishes. Mm-hmm. There's the opening fight sequence, which did you play on? Or I played on normal or standard the first way through, and it was mostly fine. It's very reminiscent of RE4. I know a lot of people who played on hardcore the first time like had a lot of issues with it.
I bet that would be really tough.
The only thing I will say about it, I've played through this game 5 times now, and I don't. I mean, my only assumption is that it's just on a timer, but it's unclear like what the timer is, because you never beat all of the enemies. Like at some point you literally take an arrow to the knee.
Yeah.
And then like a cutscene happens and that's the end of that sequence. But I've had it where it's like it's taken 4 minutes. I've had it where it's taken like 8. And so I feel like it's unclear like if there are more triggers than just it being on a timer, like if you have to kill a certain number of enemies or what exactly is going on.
I wonder if it's based on position, because I got to a point in my last playthrough, I was doing the speed run this morning, and I literally was like standing up by a house, and I was like, there's literally no one else. Like, I have killed everyone. And then I just ran to the middle of the area, and then like that cutscene triggered.
Sure. I've had it happen in a few different places, so I don't know. Okay. But
yeah.
It's whatever. I think definitely like from my perspective, as a fan of the more classical Resident Evils, it's like as an intro, it's like all right, like we'll see where this goes.
The only two things that I really have to say about that whole part right there was if you kill the guy with the big old hammer, or Ursa or whatever his name is, I was really disappointed to see him show back up in that same next cutscene where he jumps down, and then later on when you're in the stronghold, he's alive. And I thought it was going to be some like Metal Gear Solid 3 thing where like
that would be kind of cool. Yeah.
Like if you kill the end before the boss fight, you just don't fight him at all. Like that's
because like other than normal like other enemies, like it does seem to be implied that there's one of these.
Right.
Like there are a few enemies that it's like there seems to be an implication that there is one.
Yeah.
So that would be cool. I guess it would kind of, I don't know. Metal Gear did it.
Because even like the one that Chris fights, like I just assume it's the same one that Ethan killed. It just got brought back or something like that.
Maybe.
The other thing was they show 2 Lycans riding in on horses, and you never see that again. And I wonder if like something got cut later on. It'd be really interesting to hear about.
Definitely
that at some point.
I can't speak to that too much, and I think we've talked about this off, in the last week or so. There definitely does seem to be, just from looking at concept art, but also like a lot of the rumors surrounding this game, it does seem like there was a lot cut and changed. So it seems entirely possible. And to that, it's like weird for that part to be left in, because there is nothing. You find a lot of Lycans in this game, and there's nothing other than that scene. There's never anything to imply like horses or horseback riding or anything like that, or even using vehicles. Like you could almost see a world where this is like RE6 style, like you get some Lycans flying in on a chopper, shooting you down, and you're like racing across the bridge. Like thankfully, none of that happens. But I will say, so like we do get so this is our first taste of like combat, and one thing that is pretty clear from the get-go is a lot of the enemies you're going to be fighting are really aggressive and fast in this game. And Resident Evil has had a whole just a whole gallery of types of monsters you fight, and like classically we have zombies that are generally pretty slow. Maybe some of the more action heavy 5 and 6. You have maybe some enemies that are a little smarter, or they'll do different. They'll behave differently. So it's cool. Like your first encounter is like, hey, these enemies, they will run at you. Like these are Lycans. Like they're gonna behave like that. They're gonna be fast. They're gonna be aggressive, which is cool. I like that about them. So you meet the creepy old lady. There's some light exploration. And you meet a couple of survivors, and you find yourself at Luisa's. Which is a big kind of call it a mansion, I guess. It's a significantly bigger house than everything else in the village. And you're immediately introduced to like several, maybe a dozen, like 9, 10 people.
Yeah, something like that.
So you meet this. I'm blanking. I don't remember. I think some of them got names. Some of them had names. I'm blanking on all of them.
Wasn't like Ellen or something like that?
It might be Ellen. So you meet a
Yeah.
girl and her dad. Her dad's
Yeah.
injured.
Yeah.
So you help them get through the gates and you get inside Louisa's, where everyone else is kind of hiding out. They mention they're like there's a lot of infighting. There are people that aren't happy that we've been let inside. They're scared. There's a lot of comments about Mother Miranda,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is, if not the first, it's one of the very early parts in the game where we learn about this Mother Miranda character, who's supposed to be this like caretaker of the village. Like everyone loves her and they basically worship her. They say like a prayer
for her. Yeah.
Yeah, at some point, and it's a very like cult like prayer.
Yeah. Elena is her name, by the way.
Okay, yeah. So, what did you think of this scene?
Like when you think about, I feel like if you and I were to like sit down and someone would be like, okay, I need you to like roadmap everything that happens in this game.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a scene we could just completely forget about. Like, oh right, remember that time you're in the burning house and they say those things and you get in the truck and you drive? Like I completely just forget like that this moment even happens.
And especially if you're doing like when you're doing the speedrun playthroughs, like you're skipping all the cutscenes, and like a large part of that section is cutscenes, and so there's like, it's weird like doing that. And then what I did is I ended up watching someone else do a full playthrough to see what they thought, and like they're watching all the cutscenes, and so it's fun to do that after doing a speedrun and realize how much stuff you're skipping. And that section in particular is a lot. I won't say that this is like a complaint of the game or anything. I think it's probably just another like thing of like there was a lot of stuff cut. Like I imagine there is more to these characters that was probably intended to be in this game, and they just were cut. And by cut I mean killed off immediately.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, right? Because like you hear that prayer, and it's like, well, hold up. This is like full on cult that I found myself in, to some extent, and I think unfortunately we don't really get to see or learn that much more from their perspective. You get a little bit of it. There's some documents that are like, why has Mother Miranda abandoned us? Mm-hmm. But like that's about as far as it goes, and you just kind of have to piece the rest together.
Yeah.
So it would have been interesting to like, for them to be around a little longer, but also the way the game's set up, I feel like Resident Evil isn't always well suited to have like normal, totally average and fine characters just being alive. If that makes sense, right? Like, if they're alive and interactable, they're usually like a shopkeeper or something else is going down with them. Like, so I don't know. I guess like their fate was always sealed in some aspect.
Yeah, because I thought they were setting up Elena, or I thought they were setting her up to basically be like, oh, she's gonna be this like, this side
like
character that we go back to here and there, and like, again, we gotta go check on her or something like
obviously
that.
it's hard to like put too much stock into rumors. Like it's interesting to look at rumors now, having beat it, and be like piece together what was accurate, what wasn't. But I think there was a rumor that she would be playable.
Oh, huh.
Or there are rumors of a third playable character,
okay.
Which obviously didn't pan out. But so it's hard to tell, right? But she definitely, like, if you think about that escape sequence, I think in any other game she lives.
Yeah.
Right? Or like she definitely does not. Like she bites it very quick, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. So yeah, you get out of that burning house. You get the 2 little tablets you have to spin, and then you are on your way to the castle. Not before Heisenberg intercepts you, and then you kind of get that. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the gathering of all 4 of the lords and Mother Miranda together.
So you get your the meeting of the minds. So there's Mother Miranda, and you have the 4 lords. So in this game, it's actually, I think there's a moment with the shopkeeper where he's like, this is what you got to do. And it's a very Dark Souls 2-esque thing of like, oh, you got the 4 great souls. So you have the 4 lords you got to track down. And there is Lady D, everyone's favorite.
Yeah.
You have Heisenberg.
Donna, yeah, you have Heisenberg. You got Donna Benevento or whatever. Which that
Benevento.
was this is the one thing I wanted to mention is that was like when you have that where you wake up after Heisenberg takes you, like the doll from Donna is like the first thing you see. I remember being very freaked out by that. I was like, "What is this thing?"
And I, of course, as a former puppeteer myself, was elated.
Yeah,
was joyous over this edition. So Donna Benevento, and her doll.
Yeah.
And then
it's
Moreau.
Moreau, yeah.
It was this like kind of like hunchback.
Thing. Yeah, very hunchback.
Kind of looking creature.
Yeah.
He's like a fish man, basically. Yeah. So these are the four lords, and when you first meet them, they're kind of fighting over who gets you, essentially. Mother Miranda's there. There's not a whole lot of interaction like between you and her. It's a lot of just infighting between the four lords. And she decides that Heisenberg gets to have his fun. And so there's a quick chase sequence where you're kind of running through very narrow corridors of this cave. There's a couple like traps that you find yourself in.
Which I died. I was gonna say I died a couple times too with that those spinning ones at the end because I'm like, where am I supposed to go? Am I supposed to hide or something?
That one's a little tough. It's only ever tough like when you don't know because it's dark and basically there's like a little cubby area in the back corner of the wall that you can kind of hide yourself in. But it's a little hard to see, and even actually looking directly at it, it's a little hard to tell, and so it's kind of like. You could luck into it, or you just see it after a couple times because you don't really have a lot of time to work with. Yeah,
and so then eventually it like cuts your handcuffs, chains off thing. Then that's I think it's right after that you end up meeting I think that's maybe where you meet the Duke for the first time.
It's where you meet the Duke. So you do once you escape, you get back to the elevator. Or is it? It's like a doorway that you're like opening. That's when Heisenberg intercepts you. So you get back to there, you open it up, and you find yourself near the entrance of the castle. And this is where you meet the Duke.
Yep. What like I guess the general question is like, do you like him? Do you wish? Well, I guess what were your overall thoughts?
I mean, so the Duke is obviously like, and it's the way he was set up. Like he's the merchant of this game. And the merchant is this beloved, I almost hesitate to call him a character. He's a beloved merchant from RE4.
I'd call him a character, but...
I guess so. It's been a while since I played RE4, so there's probably more to him than I remember. He's got some very classic lines that people love to quote. He's great. The merchant's great. He's like very mysterious, right? And I think it works too. Like his mysteriousness works because... Here's this guy just selling like a bunch of high-grade military weapons and ammo, right? Just randomly. And so like it works that he's like, who is this guy? And they never have to explain it. It's always, it's a thing. And so the Duke is very similar, right? He like rides up in this carriage. He's got horses.
Yeah, that's true.
But he just opens up the back. He is massive. He's just this massive individual. And he's got all this stuff he's gonna sell you, and he can upgrade your gear. Later, you can bring him fish and meat to get some permanent unlockables, which is nice. You can sell stuff to him. He's very much intended to be the merchant. He even quotes him at one point. He says, "What are you buying?" And then he's like, "Ah ha ha, that was something an old buddy of mine used to say," which is like it's obviously a nod. It's obviously like this is something for the fans. But if you think about it, like that's just a really cool tie-in. Like it's super cool to be like, oh, okay, all right. I'll say this. What I really, really, really like about the Duke, is that I do feel like I think contextually within this game's narrative, he gets some amount of agency, I think. Like, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You've played RE4 more than I have, for sure. But it feels like the original Merchant is just kind of there, and he's mysterious and he's weird, and like no one really knows what he's up to. And the same is the case with the Duke. But the Duke, it feels like he knows the Lords.
Yeah,
it feels like he actually
sure.
has a lot of familiarity with the villains of this game, with the village itself. And yes, he is at the end of the day just a merchant, but like it feels like there is more going on with him.
Yeah.
Even though it's still very mysterious. But even like his relationship with Ethan, like in like towards the end of the game, right? There's a scene with him where you're like, it just feels like they actively like, yes, this is very much them just let's do the merchant again. It felt like there was some clear effort to like make him a more distinguished character than just hey, it's another weird merchant guy, which I appreciated.
Yeah, they made him really kind of, in a way, like part of the plot.
Yeah.
Which I also feel like maybe could be a good thing or a bad thing. Because, like, let's say after you kill Lady D, you get the flask, you go back. Like, when you have that section where you're like, oh, go to the house with the red chimney, and then here go after Moreau and Donna, like, you don't really have anyone available in the story to tell you exposition-wise what to do next. So it's like, oh, how about we just have the Duke do, you know what I mean?
It makes sense,
kind of like
you
that.
know, a lot of the time, so like in Resident Evil, typically, well, I don't know, I say this, but it's like it's half and half at this point, right? So like 4, 5, and 6 are not like this at all. But if you think of 7, I guess 1, 2, and 3, like you're generally one central location, and it's a lot of backtracking, and you just inherently know where to go because you've got the item. Like I've got the key, and now I know I can go to the other side of the mansion, or I know I can go to the other side of the city and unlock this gate. And like in Village is a hub area, and so there are several branching paths. And while there is a very linear 1, 2, 3, 4, like you can't sequence break, or I mean maybe you can, right? Speedrunners will let us know soon, but you can't like go to 1 and then 4 and then 2 and then 3.
Right.
But you wouldn't, like the way the game's set up, you wouldn't know. You do get a key to unlock a gate, but you wouldn't necessarily know that. And so I guess it is very much a game that has no waypoints or anything. Like this is the game's waypoint. It is like let's put a character that would make sense to explain to you what is going on.
Yeah.
That is the role that he fills in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So.
And that's really about it,
cool,
though.
though.
I mean, he doesn't. I honestly feel like there's not like a ton to talk about with him in a weird way, because like he's just kind of he is just kind of the merchant. One thing I thought that was a little bit jarring is that like every time you see him, he says something to you most of the time, but then like the next time you see him, like when you're getting ready for the Moreau fight, like you see him, and then I'm like, oh, you guys just not gonna say anything to each other? Like, because at that point, like they had said something to each other every single time.
Well, it's typically, I think it's like, because he moves around and he's like in different set locations, and the first time you see him, he'll like make a comment, and I feel like let's say it's a save room, right? It's like you see him the first time, he's like, oh, here I am, I've got some new weapons stocked for you.
Yeah.
And then like if you run back to that save point a few times to just do a quick save, he's just chilling. Sometimes he's sleeping.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, sometimes he'll just be like nodding off.
There was one time though, it was in the factory, where he's on the elevator, and I swear to goodness, he went like or something like that, and it scared the shit out of me. And I was like, was that you? Like I was just looking at him, and then I looked at him, and then he did it again. He just like moves back and forth, and he makes this like scary sound, like trying to scare the crap out of you or something. But yeah, so after that point, you enter the castle, which I would think is probably safe to say, like out of the main quote unquote dungeons of the game, like this is certainly probably the longest area. Maybe not
this
by
or
a
the
ton,
factory,
but, yeah.
But both I think, I think both are probably a pretty equal length.
Okay.
But of the four, the 4 Lord sections, like these are the 2 that are closest to what you would consider classic Resident Evil to be.
Yeah.
Where you have, the castle, and the factory. Like what I like about the factory, and we'll talk about it later, is it's like a similar kind of design, thought process like that they're following, right? but they're fairly different in execution. So the castle is as close as you get to textbook classic Resident Evil. You got a big, castle, right? You got a big area, multiple floors. Everything kind of wraps and folds in on itself. The
Different
puzzles
keys.
are there are different doors that have different specific keys that unlock them. There's some light puzzle solving. It's all very it is the closest you get this entire game to that. You even have in the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, we've seen these monsters that chase after you. You know, Mr. X, Nemesis. Now we have Lady D, but we also have her 3 daughters, who will appear in some more scripted sections, whereas Lady D is a little closer to like a Mr. X kind of thing in this. And so you have all of that, and your first time through, this section will take you some time. As you're learning where to go, you're figuring out the puzzles and everything. It takes a couple hours, I think.
Yeah, I think it probably took me 2.5. Yeah, maybe more.
Obviously on successive playthroughs you can do it in 10 minutes, but that is just what Resident Evil is, and it's great. Yeah. Overall thoughts on the castle?
Yeah, I did like a lot of that. Just kind of more classic Resident Evil thing. I was wondering if we wanted to play a little game real quick. Called Ranking of the Monsters. I don't know, I just made that up. So compare, you could even say Jack Baker was also that a little bit in Resident Evil 7.
Yeah,
kind of looms out of, I guess, ranking based on intimidation between Jack Baker, Lady D, Nemesis, and Mr. X. Who was probably the most intimidating?
Mr. X.
I would
without
agree.
hesitation.
Yeah, I would agree. And which is weird because Nemesis was technically kind of even harder to shoot and knock down, but yeah, Mr. X was. So I think,
and granted, some of this could be just the fact that I have played Resident Evil 3 Remake and RE8 several times. Those two, I think Lady D felt more like Nemesis to me, where I just knew where she was gonna pop up.
Oh, sure.
Same with Nemesis, right? Nemesis is fairly scripted in that game.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that.
And I think Lady D is too. Whereas Mr. X, it really just felt like anywhere. Now what I will say is she's much more similar, I think, in design to Mr. X, where she's very tall and she just kind of walks towards you, right? Nemesis, he will sprint at you.
That's true.
He will you spot him and he's there in a moment. He does not wait. Lady D felt more like Mr. X in that respect. What I will say is, I think what's interesting, Mr. X, right? I think he's the majority of the game, right? Whereas Lady D is a fourth. She is a couple hours out of a game that took me about 9.5 to beat the first time. And so I do think I think Mr. X just has a looming presence during the vast majority of the game, and I think that adds to some of the tension. Whereas you're out of the castle and it's all right, Lady D's done. What I will say is I loved that she was just killed off that early, right?
Sure, yeah.
It was super relieving, even as someone who actively tried not to watch too much Village footage before the game's release. It was nice to know that they really didn't show that much of this game.
They didn't. Yeah,
there was a lot they did not show at all, which is really, and the stuff that they did show was in the first couple hours. I will say I was a little, not in a negative way. I was a little surprised how quickly, the daughters were taken out.
I agree. Yeah, that's why I felt like this game was going to be that's when I realized this section was going to be a lot faster than I thought it was going to be. Was when you're just kind of every next little thing you do, you're taking out one of the next sisters.
I mean, because they all have names, and you learn a little bit about them if you find the notes and stuff. But you don't if you miss that stuff, you would have no idea that they had names or who they were, right?
They all kind of look the same. I mean,
they all look fairly similar. They the first one when I did the first encounter and killed her, I definitely, it was that moment of like, oh, it's, because like it's a little afterwards. You overhear me, Lady D like raging about it.
Yeah, like what have you done to my daughter? That kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was the moment I was like, I guess she is gone. I guess that's one down. All right.
Yeah.
But this is, I love. I mean, and also like visually, especially that like main, like the main hall area where it's like the fireplace and the stairs. The castle just looks incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the whole castle sequence. Like I said before, it is the closest you get this entire game to like that textbook classic Resident Evil. And what do you know? It's still great.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Yeah.
I'll talk about the puzzles a little more in the next section because it is more puzzle centric. But I love me some RE puzzles.
Yeah.
And this game has a lot of them throughout, and that's super exciting, especially in the castle.
Yeah, and yeah, we can talk about some of like the piano and stuff like that later. But yeah, even kind of going back to the the Lady D Nemesis Mr. X thing. I felt like even when playing, so when I was playing Village, when I saw Lady D, I was just like, oh, there she is, and I feel like even if she were to hit me, I'd just be like, okay, I just took a little bit of health, and now I can just keep running. And then of course there's the main, which a little bit happened with Mr. X, but not very much. But like, you know, if you ran into a next room that has like the next key or something, you know, she usually doesn't follow you in there. Whereas like the big thing I think about with Mr. X is like, I'm trying to do like the part I think in RE2 was like, I'm trying to move these bookcases over, and this guy is like just punching the crap out of me. Whereas, you know, like he was present in areas of like the gameplay of the area that like I was trying to actively do things. Where I feel like Lady D's only really there just in between areas, and you can usually just like run by her.
And when it is like one of the early the encounter where she slices your hand off, like when it is a sequence where you're actively needing to do something, there's a lot of tension there. But it is a short sequence, right? Like but I will say there are times where she will follow you through rooms. And one thing like she like ducks, she has to duck down like under the doorway. And so like I keep thinking about, I think last year there was a Twitter thread about how doors are really hard in games. Like the actual act of like having a door that you can open and close, like it's like a really, really difficult thing to program in a game. And that's why a lot of times doors open both ways.
Oh, sure.
It's like it's just easier to solve the issue that way. And now while Lady D walking through doorways, there are no doors in those doorways that she walks through. So it's not really that issue specifically, but it made me think of that a lot. Because like it is actually kind of cool to see this towering figure like have to duck through, and like watching her arms like reach around and like touch the wall as she's like passing through. The larger werewolf creature you fight a couple times in the game does something similar, where like if it's chasing you and you kind of duck into a building, it doesn't go into the building because it's too large to fit, but it will like stick its head through the doorway, and like you can see its claws like kind of reaching in and grabbing onto the walls on the inside. And like I thought that stuff was super cool. I think just from like an animation perspective.
That's cool.
But you know, just a side note there.
Sure. I thought it was interesting with the three daughters or whatnot. Like you had to find ways to get the light in and stuff like that. Some of them I thought, so like the very first one, like the window just gets shot out like on purpose, and you just shoot them. I thought like the last one was, I guess, somewhat cool, where you had to like move the bookcase and blow up the wall. But like I was really disappointed by like the second one, where it's like, oh, you literally just have to find the switch. I was like, okay, I got to get these lights open. Like, do I shoot it? Okay, there's this like chain I need to pull. It's like, oh no, I just got to like flip this switch, and then
they're very simple. It was funny, the first one. So these are vampires, right? So the first one, the window gets blown out, and for some reason, I think I might have just like misheard her dialogue or something. I don't remember what she says specifically, but for some reason I was like, oh right, the light, of course, sunlight. When it's actually not, it's the cold.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that might
There's
be it.
there are documents that basically like specifically mention their reaction to cold weather.
Oh, okay. That makes
So it's
sense.
not. I thought that was kind of a cool like. You are like the things you are doing are putting sunlight into the room you're in,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually the cold that is like
Okay.
weakening them and making them vulnerable. So
Maybe
I
I
thought that was
shouldn't
a
have.
cool little like switch up on their
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, that is cool. Okay. Um, yeah, so you kill like the first one. You end up having this kind of like longer section where like Lady D is talking to Mother Miranda about doing this and doing that. The only reason I'm mentioning this part was I was stuck here for a considerable amount of time because I did not see Lady D's key hanging on the corner of the wall. You know where
It
like
was the
that is?
same. That happened for me too.
Okay, because I was like, where am I supposed to go? Like, I can't go anywhere else. And then eventually I finally found the key, and I was like, oh my goodness. Of course, that's when Lady D goes through the door. You got your hand chopped off. Yeah, I thought the tension was. That was probably the only time like the tension is high. To me, I guess I felt like in that entire castle.
Mm-hmm.
Other than maybe the blood wine cellar at the basement. I knew some of those like monster guys were gonna jump out here and there. It's kind of like near where the dungeon is a little bit too. You
Yeah.
also saw in like that maiden demo. Um, yeah, I don't necessarily have a ton else about the castle. Like you have the rooftop area. You kind of you end up getting the sniper rifle up there. A lot of like secret passageways in throughout the
The
castle.
rooftop area. There's a lot of this game that like reminds me of various things,
Mm-hmm.
Bloodborne related, but the rooftop area especially, like,
Oh sure.
it's giving me some heavy Bloodborne vibes. I mean, they're both just like gothic horror, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just inherently they will.
Yeah.
One other thing I do want to mention about the castle before we move on, too far is this is the first of the labyrinth puzzles we find.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's a quick little like short story about this guy who like builds these labyrinths to his like 4 wives or whatever. Um, there's not like a whole lot to them. They're just 4 puzzles you can do throughout the game. They find the ball that you need to put into the puzzle to be able to do it. And it says these short little like puzzles to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you get like some crystal that you can sell
things. Yeah.
to the merchant for a lot of money. I just really enjoyed doing them, and I really liked the short story. I really like mythology, and the short story like specifically felt like a myth kind of thing, and I just really enjoyed it. There's not too
Sure.
much to it. I was just like, this is super cool.
The only thing I would have thought was cool because I actually held this is before you get the wording, like of the wording on items that say combinable.
Yeah,
I thought, okay, well, if I collect all of these like crystallized remains, like they'll get put
that would
into
be cool.
something, and then there'd be like one big treasure you could sell, but it wasn't like that.
Yeah, and it could be something that's like tied specifically to the character in the story. That would be cool. So let's talk about the boss fight.
Yeah, because you get the masks of dawn or
Mm-hmm.
sorrow or joy or whatever, all those things. Then yeah, is this really explained when you get the knife?
Yes,
That
it
you
is.
okay, because I must have missed something.
There's a
somewhere.
document.
Okay.
I don't remember the specific wording on it, but basically, I think it's. Let me think. I think it's after the rooftop section, maybe
Okay.
before. You're kind of in like an attic area. I think it's where you find. There's a couple sections in the game where you can find like treasure maps.
Yeah, I never
And
did the one in the castle. I
yeah,
never did
so
that
there's
one.
I think it's in that section too. There's like a document that basically is like, oh, there's rumors of this dagger that's buried in some guy's coffin in the castle.
Okay.
And that the dagger specifically is coated in like some types of poisons or something. I don't remember the specific details, but yes, it's absolutely in like some documents, and I at least had found it at the time. So for me, when I found the dagger, like I immediately knew.
Mm-hmm.
So to answer your question, yes, it's explained.
Okay, and I figured it probably was, and honestly, I probably read that, but I just probably forgot at the
Sure.
time. But
It happens.
yeah, Lady D shows up. You stab her with that. She turns into a giant dragon
Yep.
monster. Is it weird that I was a little disappointed that she just turns into like a giant monster? I mean, I know that's the trope, right? But I guess I
Sure, but
would
I
have
guess
just thought it
typically
been
you fight
cooler.
them in like a normal form first,
Yeah,
and then they like slowly transform into different phases. I
yeah,
was cool with it. It's
yeah.
a cool fight.
Really kind of, I mean, maybe other than the last boss fight, like certainly probably the longest boss fight of the
Mm.
game, wouldn't you say? Like I felt like the Moreau
So
fight was
the
much
boss
shorter.
fights absolutely depend, like the length of them depend on the difficulty, and then also like if you're using infinite ammo or like which playthrough you're doing. I think
True.
vastly determines how long the boss fight goes on for.
Yeah, and even I guess to kind of give context, even the speed run I did today, the weapon I had the infinite ammo on was I can't remember what it's called, but it's the Chris's handgun that you get in his section. I had that gun infinite ammo. And I just like
Mm-hmm.
barreled through Moreau, I barreled through Heisenberg, his other part. Some of the other like sub bosses I just barreled through,
Yeah.
but like I
So I
felt
will
like
say the Heisenberg fight on Village of Shadows.
mhm.
Uh, that takes. We'll talk more about it. When
Okay.
we get there.
Yeah.
That fight can go pretty long.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to some of that stuff. But
It's not too
um,
bad. I actually, to be totally honest, I enjoyed that fight more on Village of Shadows than I did in any other difficulty, and I like that
okay.
fight.
Yeah.
But it being on Village of Shadows, you inherently you really have to actively do what the game is wanting you to do.
Yeah. Like guard and
Um,
stuff like that.
you I almost never guard in this game, but you
Yeah.
have to guard. You
Yeah.
have to be a little more strategic. You've got to really think about what you need to do in that fight more than you do just on other difficulties, and I
Hmm.
enjoyed it a lot more for that.
Yeah. But yeah, even with the Lady D fight, she really you kind of just run around in a circle in the castle, and then she picks you up. You run up to the top, shoot her a few more times. Like she has some moments where she's kind of off in the distance. You kind of use your sniper rifle, kind of shoot her down a little bit. Um, I always felt like, in a weird note, that I was always right next to the monster, and I just always assumed it would just one hit kill me and eat me or something, but it never did. I don't know if you had any thing like that. I guess I felt like there
No.
was at times I was like right next to it, and I just feel like it would damage me or hurt me or eat me, and it was like, oh, you're just not gonna do anything,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah, I don't think
But yeah,
so.
that was maybe just a weird side note for me. But I mean, I think this fight was pretty unremarkable. I guess at the end of the day, I really wasn't.
It's a fun fight. It's definitely visually cool because you're at the top of this tower,
Yeah,
and it's just a really huge dragon. So it's I think it's just a cool design.
yeah,
Um, you end
yeah,
up when you kill her, you end up crashing down into the tower, so you fall back down.
yeah.
Um,
And then you
Ethan
find.
just surviving all the things.
I know I thought about that too. Like he's gonna find a way and stuff like that, which we do kind of find out why a little bit. But yeah, then you
Sure.
find this dirty flask, as I believe the item calls it.
Yep,
At the
it's
time.
it's got a bunch of gunk on it. It's kind of glowing. It's got this
Yeah.
gold kind of liquid, we'll say, inside
Yeah.
of it. So you escape the castle. There is okay. So you get out of the castle. There's a little hut. You can kind of walk in. There's a save area. Um, you kind of see a couple other there's a well, but you can't really do anything with the well yet. There's a drawbridge on the other side of the river, but it's up, so you can't do anything there yet. So you kind of keep progressing, and you're in a pretty small little cave area, and you have a run-in with the old lady again.
Yeah.
And again, she says some cryptic things. Ethan's like, "What's going on?" She just says a bunch of cryptic stuff.
Death
Kinda
comes for
walks
us
away.
all, whatever, stuff like that.
And it's yeah. She makes some comments about, "Are you dead?" Or all these things. But, however, Colin, this is the moment where we get the first tease of a pretty major reveal later in the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
So you see imagery for the Four Lords. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you also see, again in the middle, a certain emblem, an insignia of sorts that Ethan's hey, that seems familiar. I feel like I've seen that somewhere before.
Yeah.
And if you look closely, you realize that's the Umbrella logo.
Yeah.
Now,
Wait,
Collin,
what? No, yeah.
Resident Evil is no stranger to like a seemingly small event being Umbrella or like being like some larger conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
And so I think from the get-go, it's like, well, okay, hold up a second. Like,
Yeah.
we all know and we all know to expect something like this to happen, but it's a very like early kind of, hey, that's weird,
Yeah.
interesting, and you start as you progress through the game. We don't need to talk about every instance, but as you progress through the game, you start seeing and noticing the Umbrella logo a lot.
Yeah.
Just a lot in cave paintings.
Yeah.
And elsewhere.
Yeah. And because the moment I thought about was like, yeah, you played through entirety of RE4 until like Krauser starts talking about like Umbrella. Oh, almost let it slip, something like that, and that kind of gets your mind going. Of like, whoa, what does Umbrella have to do with this? Kind of a little bit the same thing here. I guess this is kind of for the end, but like how that Umbrella logo gets revealed at the end, I wish was a little bit more. And I don't know, because I don't want to also say like, oh, well, you have to tell me the exposition in front of me, where I feel like, you're reading a note from Spencer, whereas I felt like that moment could have been bigger through like, I don't know if it's a cutscene or like Chris finding it out, like, and making a comment. He makes a comment about that document, but I just feel like it's a very like, oh yeah, there's that thing, and then you just move on. I guess I just felt like there could have been more, and maybe it is just through non-verbal stuff, but I guess I just felt like there could have been more storytelling about the Umbrella logo and the origins.
So I'm completely okay with it because there are several documents that kind of build up to it.
Okay.
There's quite a few that you start hearing like whispers, or like a couple documents will have like a one-off sentence, or some will go a little bit more. But you start, as you progress through the game, you're getting hints and teases of some kind of scientist who's been visiting the village a lot and talking to Mother Miranda. And so there's a lot of lead up to it, and then to the reveal, which I guess we can just talk about now. Major spoilers, but like you learn that Spencer had been visiting the village a lot, seemed to have some kind of relationship with Mother Miranda. To be honest, like the tone of that letter seems to be a lover's. At least that's kind of how I take it.
I guess I didn't hear that or feel like that, I guess, at the time.
Like or very, very close friends. That's kind of my interpretation of it. Like, just some of the wording that he uses in that letter felt like there was maybe some chemistry there. Maybe not like totally overt, but it definitely felt like it. So you learn that much of the story is kind of like an Umbrella origin story, where basically Spencer finds inspiration in Mother Miranda's work with I'm blanking on the name of it. It was like the Kudo or something.
Is it the collective or something like that?
No, it's like the thing that you're using to infect people.
I don't know.
I'm blanking on the name for it, but like in her work and what she like the experiment she's doing, like he finds a lot of inspiration, and he says, what I realized is that our desires were different. You wanted to bring back the life of somebody, whereas I wanted to change the world. And so he talks about, he finds that instead of using like the mold or whatever to experiment on people, he believes that a vaccine or a virus is the better solution, and he decides that to do this to do it to sort of this company that he wants to use this umbrella symbol that they have seen in the village, and so that is how the Umbrella Corporation begins.
And he talked about this plant in Africa, which is essentially the Resident Evil 5.
The progenitor.
Storyline.
Yeah.
Because like there's that part in 5 where Sheva and Chris end up finding like the plants that they were using for the viruses and stuff.
It all ties together.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm totally chill with it being... Because like, otherwise Umbrella's not really in this, right? Like there's not much to do for them right? Like, or Blue Umbrella, like whoever, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm cool with it being that. Like, it's a really, I think, in the grand scheme of things, learning that is where the umbrella symbol comes from, and like learning a little more about where Spencer got the inspiration for things, like it feels not like a huge major like franchise altering revelation right now, current day.
Yeah.
But I think it's like a pretty cool thing. I liked it a lot. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's, of course that kind of happens towards the end, and I wonder about, like, the end of 4 was about Las Plagas, and then 5 was more about them using the like T virus or progenitor virus and like mixing it with Las Plagas.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if like maybe the next game sets up something that like one of the T viruses or something like that they mixed with the mold, and then that makes some other crazier thing. I don't know. But yeah, so you get back to the village, you find out that you're holding your daughter in your own hands.
Yeah, it's her head.
Yeah,
So,
which I thought,
question,
how'd you put her big head in that little flask? But
do
it's
you?
okay.
This is kind of in my interpretation of it. Do you think that it is physically her,
Or what specifically?
or like I just? So I think it's the intention is the reveal is supposed to be like, oh, it's physically her head inside of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of felt like, I mean, it totally could be. Granted, some of the other things happening in this game could totally be that. I always assumed that it was more of a like metaphorical head. I guess I don't know what it would be.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. Maybe it's her blood. I don't know.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, like the
But I thought like perhaps it is like not physically her head, but like some other aspect of her.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess it's never really like spelled out, right?
Right. Yeah, so you find that out, and you have to go find. I think even the Duke says like you have to go find this person who lives in the house with the red chimney.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to talk too much about the village now.
So I think I want to wait till after the second part, because that's when it kind of opens up a little bit more.
Right.
Sure. But yeah, you get back to the Duke, and he's like, "All right, Lady D's down. He got her head. He's like, you got to get the other flask. So there's 3 more." And he mentions there's the House Beneviento, and then there's Moreau.
Yep.
And it's kind of presented, you and I talked about this, where we thought like perhaps you get a choice in the order of things. You don't.
Yeah.
You do one, then the other.
Which in the end, you really could, because it's not like, I mean, the Beneviento, it's not like you needed a weapon or an item to do Moreau's fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like I feel like they really could have made you choose whichever one.
The only thing is like you get the key attachment you need to get to Moreau's area.
Right.
So like they totally. You could have, and maybe we'll talk about that later in like wishes for the future. But yeah, so there's a quick detour into the village to find the house with the red chimney. I don't even remember. I mean, you get like part of a key in there to get to the next location, but I don't. Yeah. I think there's some notes in there. I don't remember anything super specific though.
You're really just getting that extra key attachment to be able to unlock the door that gets you there. And you get the crank handle that you raise up the car to crawl under.
You do get the crank, yeah.
Yeah, you fight like a couple extra baddies. I think it's like the first time you get the armored one. It's the first like
padlock that you've got to solve. Which is another like thing I like in Resident Evil games, where there's like these little like padlock entries. And they're usually very simple, but I just like, it's just fun to do, and it's fun that on like successive playthroughs, if you know the code, you can just go right away and enter the code and not worry about doing the thing to get the code, right?
So did you get the jump scare? Did that freak you out at all?
Which one?
Okay, because there's the note there that says "Look out the window," and then that happens.
For some reason, I didn't get it in mine, but it happened when I was watching someone stream it. It happened for them.
See, the thing that happened with me is, I'm going to just fully admit, it was really late that night when I got to that part, and so I heard like, oh, there's this save combination. And I just immediately Googled it. I was like, I'm not bothering with this right now. Like, I'm just immediately
It's right
Googling
there.
this. I didn't even realize it. I didn't realize it. I didn't realize, like, then it was like when I came back the next time, I realized how simple it was. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know that. I just Googled it immediately.
Yeah.
So I didn't get that jump scare the first time. But yeah, I got it the second time. When I got through the next time, I was just kind of looking over.
It definitely doesn't pop up every time, and I'm not sure why. Or maybe I just, like, waited too... I don't know. Weird.
Yeah.
I have seen it pop up in other playthroughs though, and I was like, all right, that's cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, as the PlayStation 5 activity card refers to it.
Oh. The
Valley, the Puppeteer of the Foggy Valley.
I didn't know we were talking about cards today. That's awesome.
Yeah. I thought I'd throw it in there once for your fans.
Yeah. So I guess I would say the most beautiful part of this game is probably looking at Donna's house with the waterfall in the background. I would say that's probably, to me, the most, like, breathtaking part of this game.
Yeah, there's some real good visual, like, kind of set piece, or just like
Yeah.
looking out in the distance. I think with the first time, when you first get to the village, even, and it's like in the morning, you got like a really good just view. And what's cool about it, to go back to that point, is if you stand there on the top of the hill, kind of looking down to the village, you can look out and you can spot the 4 main sections. You can see the castle, you can see the factory.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
You can see the stronghold. You can. I don't think you can see Donna's house. That's probably too small. And then you can see like the reservoir.
Okay.
A Moreau section. So like I did on my successive playthroughs. Like I looked, and you totally can. You can't. I don't think you can see Donna's. Just it's hidden, and it would be right. But the other areas you can definitely see, which is cool.
Yeah. Well, even on the way there, you start getting these hallucinations with Mia, and through the entire doll area, you can kind of hear like Donna really trying to manipulate you with Mia a little bit, and I don't really know, like, there's the kind of parts where like Mia's like, oh, sorry Ethan, I can't tell you, like some of that stuff, and some of that I'm like, is it really replaying some memory that Ethan has, or is that just like hit her trying to make Mia say cryptic things to confuse Ethan even more and drive him into madness or whatever? I don't know.
I interpret it as like, I think it is like explicitly, if not exactly like a specific memory, it might be like an altered memory for him.
Sure.
You know, a lot of this game really like plays with family values. You know, parent-child relationships, specifically. Especially with the thing about Ethan and Rose, and then Mother Miranda and her daughter. Like, that's prevalent through a lot of the game, and just thematically, but I think also in this section specifically, you know, this whole house is like Ethan's personal nightmare, just like, I think, as a father. And like it kind of digs in, like, if you think even just puzzles, right? Like, it's a very family-centric escape room, which is cool. So you get to the house. It's like you see some visions of Mia as you're walking through the forest. It gets very foggy. You get to the house. You kind of walk around. You go down into the basement, and you walk into this room, and there's the doll. So it's the doll we've seen.
Yeah.
She's sitting on a chair with like a note or something. You bend down, and she pops up and starts laughing. She's like, I'm waiting for you.
Because the flask is on the doll, too.
The flask that's what it is. It's not a note, it's the flask.
Yeah.
You get knocked out, all your weapons, all your items are gone, and you find yourself in what is essentially an escape room of this just with the whole basement. Collin, go first. What thoughts on this section here?
So even just a little bit before that, one thing I thought it did really well was I was expecting something to happen. And so like when I got to that part, when I got to the house, I literally made it like some like military shooter where I was like, all right, I'm going to clear every room of this house. And I'm going to make sure like nothing's in here going to make like screw with me, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then it's like you realize you go through all the rooms upstairs, you go through all the rooms downstairs except the very last one, and you're like, there's nothing here. There's like no one here.
Yeah.
so yeah, you get your weapons taken away after reaching for the doll, and there's a life-size doll of your wife,
Mm-hmm.
your dead wife,
Life-size
on
like
the table.
mannequin.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
mannequin. Thank
want to
you.
say it again, similar to the castle, and I guess we could say this for the majority of this game. This house looks really nice. Like as
Yeah,
soon as you step in,
for
like
sure.
it just looks good.
Hmm.
Um, so
Yeah,
yeah, you have the doll there.
you're pulling
Um,
off different parts of the body parts of
mhm.
the doll. You're like rolling the eyes over to look at different emblems.
Yep.
You pull off your wedding ring that's bloody that you have to wash off. It's got a code. You even have like a picture of Mia's like dead body after she got
Yeah. Just
shot.
like sitting next to her.
Yeah, sitting next to her. You get the chime that is in the house. I didn't recognize it the first time I played, but that musical chime box that is in
Mm-hmm.
the Winters' house at the beginning of the game is now
Yep.
in like a side room. So you're really just kind of running back and forth with these different tools. So like you get the winding, or you get the ring, you rinse off the ring, you put in the code about something about the day of everlasting love or something
It's
like that.
what is it? I think it's 5/29/11.
I know it's 11. I'm pretty sure it's the last numbers, but yeah.
So
So
I think it's May 29th, 2011.
okay.
Is my assumption.
Yeah, we're almost at the 10-year anniversary.
Yeah.
So we'll be
I,
back next week. No,
for their wedding
yeah,
anniversary.
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Then
Yeah.
you get the you get to the music box, do the music box, get the tweezers, go back to the doll, take the tweezers out of the mouth. You get this roll of film. That's another
Mm-hmm.
little escape room puzzle that plays. And I kind of like I mentioned to you talking before recording about like it felt like very sinister, like that movie where you're like
Mm-hmm.
watching this roll of film and you just see this. They're going down into some deep well kind of thing, and I expected like it was going to be like some tape where somebody was going to die or whatnot. But that entire time, like when you play through it again, you're like, okay, I can just run here and just do this. But like when I was
Yeah.
playing it, I was like so slow and
Yep.
meticulous, and this was really the main part of the game. Maybe other than after getting like your hand chopped off from Lady D and you gotta kind of run around. This was really the only time I felt really scared in this game. Like I was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, I don't want to do this right now.
So this is where I want to talk about the puzzles in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is obviously all puzzles. Okay. I've seen a lot of like. I think majority of people I've seen online love this part. It is maybe one of my favorite parts of a Resident Evil game. Period. So I obviously love it.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I've seen a lot of people talk about the thing we haven't mentioned yet, which is like the back half of this section, which we'll get there in a moment. I don't love it for that. Like that part's cool and like great and that's awesome. I really love it for just there's no weapons, there's nothing, there's no enemies that you encounter in this first half. It's just strictly puzzles, and it's strictly like the kind of Resident Evil puzzles I love, which are not super difficult, but it's all very like tactile. It's all very real things in the environment that you're interacting with, right?
Yeah.
So like and I think that's one area where first person Resident Evil like thrives, maybe more so than the other camera perspectives, is this is very like RE1, right? Where it's like, oh, I walk into this room and there's there's like a I don't know, like a crow statue on the bookshelf, and if you take the crow and you spin its wing, then you get a key, and you can use that key in this other door. So like, you know, light puzzles like they're not super difficult puzzles because you just know to interact with these things, but what makes them really interesting and like satisfying is that they're physical things in the environment, and so you're rewarded by actually looking at the environment, which is just littered with stuff, especially this area. um a lot of it's not interactable. Like it's mainly the stuff that can be used, and so like you maybe make the argument that this area would be cooler if like they expanded it and everything was interactable or whatever. What I really love about it is that these are tangible things that you're like grabbing onto, that you're taking keys out of, that you're taking items, and then just figuring it out. And that was the case with the castle as well, and it's the case in other areas of the game, where like all of these puzzles, even though they're relatively simple, for the most part, there might be a couple that like take a moment to figure out, um, but they all just are very logical. It's like I have a bloody key. There's a sink with running water.
Yeah.
I guess I could combine that. I could wash the key off.
Mm-hmm.
Or the other thing Resident Evil games do a lot, which I really like, is sometimes you get a key item that you have to investigate. You have to actually look at it, because if you turn it around in the like investigation viewer, you can like detach something from that item, right? And so there's like moments like that where you might be stuck and it's like, oh, wait a minute, I need to look at this item more. So you look at the key ring, or if you look at the ring after you wash it off and you kind of spin it around, you see numbers on the inside inscribed.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, okay, that's a 6-digit number. There's a 6-digit padlock. Like, okay. I love that. It's what I love the most about this section. Like, obviously the back half is also really cool, and I like that. But the reason why I like this moment so much is because, first, as relatively simple as it is, it's not super complicated, and you can do it, especially on multiple. Like, I spent about an hour in this my first playthrough. I think every other time it's been like 10 minutes,
Right.
including the second part. So like it's very, very quick afterwards. And maybe you don't get as much out of it on successive playthroughs. But man, it's just fun in Resident Evil to solve these kinds of puzzles, because it is, you're actually interacting with like a physical thing in the environment. You're spinning it around, you're turning it, you're like combining things together, and it all just logically fits. You talked about in the beginning of the game, where to access what eventually leads you to, not quite to the castle, but to where you meet the four lords, is those two like spinning dials. Basically, it's the I think the angel and the beast or whatever, and the demon. Like, you don't really call that a puzzle. You just find those and you know to slot those in. Like, it just feels good.
Yeah.
It's a tactile and tangible thing that you're like doing with the environment. It just feels good to do. And this is that section just to its natural progression.
Yeah.
What does eventually happen? So to get out of this, right, you need to restore energy to the elevator. So you need to find one. You need to find the fuse box key, and then once you unlock that, you need to find a fuse.
Yeah.
When you get the key to the fuse box
In the well. Yeah.
in the well, which is you were led to from watching the tape, you go down to the well. You get the key, and as you're climbing the ladder back up the well, you hear a crash, and you hear like the laughter and kind of crying of a baby.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right.
Yeah.
So you go back up, and the lights are off now. It's darker. You see some blood, just a trail of it through the hallway. You start hearing this baby more, right? And then there it is.
You all see, they see that long umbilical cord looking thing that's
Yeah,
on the ground too.
Just a giant fetus baby thing, monster. Just a grotesque looking thing.
That is Norman Fetus. That is him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, in a weird way, and I kind of mentioned it the other day, but like that moment was a little spoiled for me, in this fact that when you go into the room to the side of the room with the doll, and you have the sink, I noticed like, oh, there's this closet that has nothing in it. Oh wait, can I get in the closet? Oh yeah, I can close the door within the closet. Then it's like, okay, I know I'm gonna be hiding from something. And I just felt like at that point, like I knew that, like, yep, here it comes, and then like, yep, there it is. And it was a sight to behold, that's for sure. Like the way the like edges of the mouth like shake and reverberate and stuff like that, like that is,
it's super unsettling. So you end up having to go. When you open the fuse box, there is a I don't remember what they call it, There's a
Yeah.
thing that you can kind of you can slot into a doorway that
It's
opens
like an
a door.
image of it's like an image of a baby on a stone kind of thing. You
Yeah.
put that in a door, which of course the little Beneviento doll is sitting right there next to the door, which I thought was going to be a jump scare, but it wasn't.
Yeah. That's what I love is like I don't think I noticed it too much the first playthrough, but as I did multiple, there's quite a few times I think, whereas you're like going through solving the puzzles in the basement, even before the baby shows up, but the doll's just there, just like watching you.
Yeah.
It doesn't interact with you, doesn't say anything, doesn't move. It's just there, and like if you notice it, you notice it, and if you don't, you don't.
Yeah.
So you do go down one floor more. There's a short little like kind of walking through a kitchen area. You go into a bedroom. The fuse is there, and for me, Colin, it was as I was investigating the room after grabbing the fuse, is I noticed that I could crawl under the bed.
Yeah.
And now by that point, I had already, encountered the baby. But it was like, all right, clearly this baby's coming down here, and I know exactly where to hide.
Yeah.
So you do. It's a pretty short sequence. You run back up as you kind of evade the baby. There's a few like going this way. Nope, I gotta kind of do a 180, kind of turn around. When you put the fuse back in, there's like a very clear like
set piece
several moments of waiting for the power to restore, waiting for the elevator to open, and you're just watching as this baby is getting closer and closer to you.
Yeah.
Now, I've done this several times now, enough for me to confidently say that you are safe to stand there. Like, I think the first time I like ran around and like into the like office room and like kind of like had to juke the baby out a little bit. But like every successive time, like it doesn't take long enough that you will get caught. That you can stay by the elevator and like maybe that relieves some of the
I've done that
tension.
every time I've played. I just stand by the elevator and just wait for it to open.
Yeah.
Just walk right in.
So it does open up in time, and then when you like press up, it definitely has like a moment where like the lights go out and they come back on and the baby's right there next to the elevator.
Yeah.
So just in time.
Yeah, and it's like in your face, kind of like when you're on the other side of the elevator and stuff.
So ends again one of my favorite like moments in this game. Probably one of my favorite just like RE areas. I would love for I do to one extent, right? Like the first playthrough again was like 50 minutes to an hour of that section. So I do think that there's maybe a chance that it could overstay its welcome because like you can do it in 10 minutes. I guess it would be cool if they like you could like randomize the puzzles a little bit.
Oh sure, yeah, almost like a Madhouse run or whatever.
Yeah.
They like randomize
but
it.
I think I would almost love like a section like that is maybe expanded out a little bit, maybe a little bit longer. I don't know if I would want, obviously a full game like that would just be a different game, a different franchise maybe, because like without weapons or anything. I don't know. I would love a section like that in RE9 that's maybe a little longer.
Yeah. Well, even 7 had that too. Coming to think about it, there's the part where like you got the birthday cake, and then you like light the birthday cake, and you get the Bunsen burner kind of that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So I loved it, and we get to the boss fight, which is essentially so when you get back up to the ground floor, there are dolls everywhere.
Yep.
Just creepy dolls littering all the different rooms.
Yep.
And you run into the main doll. She's like, laughing and mocking you and just kind of, it's like, oh, catch me if you can. So you have to catch her 3 times. It is on a timer of sorts, where if you take too long between each of them, you do get hit. Some of the dolls come to life and like.
Okay, I wondered, that happened to me the very first time where they like stabbed me or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think like it's a pretty generous timer. And then on successive playthroughs, like it's interesting to kind of unravel that boss fight a little bit because so you catch her 3 times. The first time will always be the same.
Right.
And then the second time, it's one of 2 locations, and then the third time, it's one of 2 other locations. So there's a little bit of variables at play.
Yeah.
But it's a relatively pretty short sequence. I think it works for what it is. You do you take your scissors that you have and you're like stabbing them into the head of the doll, and then the third time you catch her, you like realize it's actually Donna that you're chasing. So there's like a pair of scissors just in her head.
Yeah, with the doll right next to her. Yeah. So like, so all of that was supposed to be like a hallucination, which I thought was kind of like, I actually would have liked to have seen more of like Donna herself, because you don't really get to see that at all.
Yeah.
Like, so here comes my biggest question that I've heard no one say anything about. So, the baby, was this also a hallucination of Ethan's, or was the baby actually real? Because if the baby was actually real and not a hallucination, that baby's still alive even after Chris's destruction thing. I don't know, maybe because Mother Miranda dies at the end. I don't know, but I like to think that there's some weird world where this baby is still alive in this basement. Which I was a little let down, because when you kill the doll at the end, I was like, oh, that's it? Like, I figured we were gonna go.
Can you imagine if the baby comes busting
I thought
through?
I thought that was gonna be the boss fight. Was gonna be the baby. But then I don't know if that'll be something where Capcom has legal troubles because you apparently kill babies in this game. I don't know.
Yeah.
They could twist.
I'm trying to think. So like, I don't remember. I'd have to go back and read, like, because there are documents about Donna. I don't remember like all of them. I think there was one about, there's like I think on your way back to the village, you take like an alternate route, because some of the path in the forest is blocked off. So you actually walk into these like houses that are in the forest, and there's some documents there about Donna. So you learn a little bit more about her then. Yeah. I think there's one, it's like a farmer or something, and he's talking about interactions with her, and he mentions how like there's a document that talks about she's like got her doll that is like her imaginary friend, and I think the document even says like, then there was a day that came where like he realized that the doll was being more lively than usual, which I think seems to imply that like, I don't think the doll aspect is a hallucination, and so I don't know, and so I do wonder if like perhaps that then would imply the other like things that you're seeing. Like, I think the Mia stuff is definitely a hallucination. I would imagine.
For sure. Yeah.
So as far as the baby, or even the other dolls, right? Like, I guess like Ethan is physically being harmed by them in that boss fight. So I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought I was just curious. I mean, it's not really that. I mean, it's not like that's an important question at the end of this game. You know, it's not. I just thought it was really.
There's a scene towards the end where the whole village is blown up, and you can kind of, there's like a hill kind of like overlooking the village, and you see a scene where the baby like runs out onto the hill and puts its little hands into its eyes, and like it's just like on its knees watching the village blow up below.
Well, I also thought it was really interesting, especially
when Final Fantasy VII remake reference there. So.
Oh. Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, you know, that you killed,
throw that in there.
You killed the baby, and then Chris comes by and go, "Why did you kill my daughter?"
Oh man,
I don't know.
So
yeah,
that is that's the puppeteer section.
Yeah, what was that called again? You said the card.
So if you look at if you're in that, if you're like, even I think walking into like go the lead up to the house in the foggy forest. If you like pull up the activity cards on the PS5, there's an activity card. It's like Puppeteer the Foggy Valley, I think.
Okay.
And it's interesting that like, actually, I don't know why I never thought to do it. I should do it in each section of the game to see what the different ones are. It just, that name specifically like stuck out to me, one because it's just a cool name, but it reminded me of like what is Irithyll of the Boreal Valley. It's like a location in Dark Souls 3.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, this is a similar kind of like naming structure.
Gotcha.
But I should look up what the other activity cards are for
Yeah.
each area.
Yeah, I hadn't even looked at them yet.
So this also leads into this return to trip to the village.
Yeah.
I think also leads into a good part to talk about exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Another great thing that I love in Resident Evil games. Collin, we talked about this a little bit off recording. I think to talk a little bit about going forward for the franchise, I think this is one thing I really, really want to see continued or even expanded upon. I spent a lot of time, probably half my time in my first playthrough, so a good 4 hours probably, just exploring this village as much as I could. What would basically happen, the structure of this game is you would go to one of the four lords, you would do that area, and then in that area you would get a crank or you would get something maybe in the area itself or on the way back that you could, or a key, and that you could then use to unlock more of the village. So, for example, there is, I think, in the next section we're going to talk about, there's like a wheel or like a crank that you can get to like move windmills around, and so you can use that. If I remember correctly, you get a wheel that you can use to like use on wells in the village, and you can kind of use that to like pull up items.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time you would return to the village, you would always have like one or two things that you could then use to access, maybe to unlock new buildings, to unlock the wells, or to just get to different areas of the village. And I told you before, it reminded me a little bit, because this is kind of a hub area, it reminded me a bit of Evil Within 2.
Yeah.
Where you just have this huge hub area that you don't have to. You can explore it quite a bit. It's not mandatory, but you probably should, because there's a lot of just really good, you can get a lot of ammo, you can get a lot of just things. There's a lot of documents that you can read. You get to learn just a lot about the village and the people who live there. Again, it's one of my favorite parts of this game is just, there are, like, as you're exploring the village, there are instances where you'll fight, like, a few lichens, but usually not that many. But otherwise, you're just exploring, and and again, the village level design is structured similar to the castle, or similar to kind of classical Resident Evil maps, where it just kind of folds in on itself. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit maze-like, but there's a lot of like, well, I can climb the ladder and get on the top of the rooftops of these buildings, and I can kind of access other areas that I wouldn't be able to by like kind of jumping into the backyard of this house and then unlocking the door.
Yep.
I just loved it. What did you think about the village?
Yeah, especially like, each time you come back, like, so you beat the castle, you've got the iron insignia key, so now you can unlock the iron insignia key doors, but then of course you don't have the well at that point, or the well wheel at that point, so then when you beat the next part, now you've got the well wheel. I did enjoy that. I think there were a little, I kind of got lost a few times there, because like, this is a part that looks like I should be able to walk through on the map, but like, no, it's blocked off. That was kind of annoying at times, but yeah, after after you beat Lady D and they give you the Duke updates the map, like, he puts all of these treasures on there, which is neat. So but yeah, even with
Resident Evil has always had like really good exploration, and stuff like that. This game more so, not just than other Resident Evils, but just in general, I feel like does such a great job of like incentivizing and rewarding exploration. It's not until a little later in the game that you can put the drawbridges down and you access the boat, and you can take the boat up and down river, and it leads into like all these different sections that you never would know about. And typically what happens is, like you mentioned with like the treasure chests that the Duke reveals, you end up finding like whole other areas and like with their own puzzles, and usually those will lead to the treasure chest or different like treasures that you can get to then sell to the Duke. Like, it all feeds in on itself. But man, like there was one specific that you take the boat downriver, and at first it looks like you're going back to the castle. But it's just like kind of a crypt area. There's there's a puzzle where there's a lantern, you gotta like take you hit the fire, and and like knock it into other lanterns to open a doorway and whatever. Um,
But you did that you did that in the castle too.
Yeah.
But this one you have to light one of the enemies on fire.
Yep. There's
and
like
then walk
never
it over to it.
endlessly spawning enemies that climb out of the wall or crawl out of a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
So yeah, you like knock the torch into them to catch them on fire, get a trophy for that, and then you kind of like steer them towards another torch so that they light that as well. It's so fun, and like a lot of the game is that too, especially the village and like the surrounding areas, not including the four lords. It's like it's one of those games where without a second thought, like anyone that plays this, like you should do a 100% run. You should do a completion run on this. Like if you don't want to worry about speed running and knife only runs, that's fine. But you should absolutely do a run where you like get all the items, you find the collectibles, because it is just so much fun to do.
Yeah. And that really puzzle, and really just seems to be the only one that you could almost kind of borderline call like a physics puzzle. I mean, other than the little balls and stuff like that. But yeah, I thought that one was really clever. I did that again on my second playthrough just to keep getting up some of the in-game the currency in the game. Yeah. And so I got through that part like super quick. It was like, yeah, do that, hit him with that. Okay, we're done. Yeah, and so one thing I also liked about was with the well thing, and that's in the same section you find the well. And I remember putting the well in, doing the well wheel on the house in the back, and I was like, wait, what? Like, where's the? Because I put my controller down, I was looking at my phone or something, and then I was like, where's the item? And I was like, oh, it pulled up a ladder, and then you crawl down that, and it's got that like minecart kind of puzzle. I thought was pretty cool. So. Yeah, and I really enjoyed like the little boat section, because then you drive on the other side, you find that like phantom fish or whatever. That's one of the pictures you can get. You also find you go through a little cave, you find another computer of I
forgot about this. Yeah,
you find the other computer. You find the antique coin from like where ones you could collect from RE7. I thought that was really cool. You also get like maybe a shotgun upgrade to
there's
stuff
also
like that's cool.
We talk about a lot of like exploration puzzles, but there's also I guess mini bosses essentially.
Yep.
Just like stronger versions of maybe some of the normal enemies you would fight, and there's there's 3 or 4 of those I think just in the game that, again, totally optional, but if you're exploring and you're going all throughout the map, like you will just find them and stumble upon them.
I have one weird little quarrel with some of it. So, and maybe I'm sure, if you're listening to this, you've beaten the game and you know this. But that little part in the graveyard that opens up that has Donna's or whoever's name plate on there.
Yeah.
That only opens up after you beat Donna. And if you don't do it on that, so like if you beat Donna and immediately go after Moreau, you are just gonna miss that, because it only opens on that trip to the village. Because I went back like after beating Moreau, I think I even beat the stronghold, and I was like, okay, when's this? How do I open this gate where this nameplate is? And I looked it up, and it was like, well, if you don't do it, if you don't go to that part after you beat Donna, it's just not gonna open at all for you. And like that means that mini boss and then that like treasure was completely missable for me.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
there's
definitely
like
that out.
I think that's not the only thing, and the game's definitely structured so that like you do the village stuff, you explore as much as you can, and then you move on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, one of the other mini bosses was it's like one of those wolves, but he's like kind of more redder. He's a lot stronger. At the time, I didn't realize that was a mini boss. I was just wondering why this wolf took so much longer to kill than the other ones.
Yeah.
So that one's up kind of by the house that burns down. Then it's like kind of even right before the stronghold. You've got I guess it's the butcher guy, where you can get some extra meat. And he's got it kind of in that wooden house.
Yeah. So next up is Moreau.
Mm-hmm.
There's the hunchback, like kind of fish man.
Yeah.
Seems like the odd one out. Kind of seems like the one that's maybe made fun of the 4 lords.
Yeah.
He seems all sad. What's cool about this one, So the other is right, like to get the flask, it's you go through, you beat the boss, you get the flask. And this one, you just kind of walk up to him, and you're like,
Yeah.
I'll be taking this,
Yeah, so
and
you
he's like,
actually,
no, no,
yeah.
no, please.
I thought that was a nice change of pace that you actually get the flask immediately, but
Yeah,
then the rest of it is just getting out of there. I thought that was a nice
yeah.
little change.
So of the four, right? So we have the castle, which is very like classic Resident Evil. Then we've got Donna, which is kind of very puzzle heavy, escape room esque. This is probably the closest to just being a very linear, almost set piece, essentially.
Yep, I agree.
There's a little like an underground in the caves exploration that you do, but the majority of this section, you are running across rooftops in the reservoir. It's flooded, and Moreau has turned into this giant fish thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're kind of running across these rooftops, creating new pathways from building to building, and just kind of avoiding this giant fish monster in the lake.
Yeah. So yeah, and even this was probably the most part that, and I think it might have just been part of the boat too, but this is probably the part of the game that reminded me the most of Resident Evil 4,
Yeah,
like specifically. And because even a part that I kind of even forget about, right before you do all that kind of running across the water and stuff, this is actually where you run into Chris for the first time. So you walk in, you've been to a couple other places, you've seen like computers set up, like you obviously know someone else is here. But this is where you first run into Chris, has another opportunity to tell you, but he doesn't. And then
he's just like, hey, get out of here. Like,
yeah.
I'm impressed you've made it this far.
Yeah. And then then Moreau comes out of the water, has this big old transformation and stuff, and a lot of his like personal demons to like try and impress Mother Miranda, like oh I'm sorry, like a lot of those like lines when you're running away from him, like I'll do better next time, like I'm sorry, all that kind of stuff. Like you kind of felt sorry for him a little bit. But yeah, I liked this kind of spot. It was a little bit of a set piecey thing. I didn't really. Okay, this is one thing that weirdly bugged me. Why is it when you ran across those like sheet metal things that were like red, the cross from one building to another? Why are you slow as heck when you run across?
Oh, because those are the vulnerable sections.
I guess, but I'm like, why?
I mean, the
answer
to that
slow.
The answer to that is twofold, right? Like,
the build
canonically, it's hey, this is not a rooftop with like a foundation underneath of you, like a house underneath you. These are just like very thin things you're walking across, so naturally you're gonna like walk carefully across them. It's like that's one, right?
True. Yeah.
Two, the other is these are the sections in which you can get eat. You can be eaten.
I died the most times in the entire game through all my playthroughs in this section.
Okay, I got it like twice. I think on across all playthroughs it was twice, but I was also even the speed runs I was fairly like careful in these sections.
Yeah, and I think the part that got me a lot of times too was where you have to have it's the red, blue, and like white the trays that come up, and you have to keep them all up, and you're supposed to run across them and stuff, and they start shaking right before they're about to go back down. I died a few times with that, but yeah, you end up you keep going, you end up getting to one of the other windmills, you get the crank, you end up moving the crank, turn the power back on, you get they call it the sluice gate or something like that. It's just a sluice, whatever. I just called it a dam, basically.
Sure.
So I just called it that. Because you find out that the way to get out of here is underwater. I think maybe even Moreau says that at some point.
Yeah.
Like it's blocked now or something like that. So yeah, you drain all the water, and that kind of sets up the Moreau boss fight. Unless I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anything else, but that's about it.
No, it does. It's a pretty. Part of activating the dam is there's a very quick puzzle to get the energy back on. There's like a yellow, blue, and a red light grid. And there's like a picture next to it, but the picture is rotated, so you just you gotta kind of like rotate in your head and like set up the colors. It's a pretty simple thing. So yeah, the boss fight, everything is drained, so the water's not there anymore. And it's a fairly like large arena,
Mm-hmm.
but at first it's only a small bit that's been open because for the rest of the arena to open, you have to like wait for Moreau to kind of crash through sections.
Very similar to the factory boss too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, actually. So I will say just for me, every time I fought Moreau, it was always just in that first section. I never really like expanded the boss fight out into the other sections.
Yeah.
Because I never really needed to. But
Sure.
yeah, just a giant fish monster thing.
Yeah. You're kind of just shooting the head.
Probably,
Yeah.
probably the most uh,
By the numbers boss fight.
Lovecraftian design.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Great design. Yeah, pretty straightforward boss fight though.
Yeah. And even with kind of the Moreau and the Lady D fight, like very Salazar vibes from Resident Evil 4, where like, you know, you got this giant monster, but then like the zombified version of them like pops out in the middle of it. Where I would say maybe like the Heisenberg fight is very more like the Sadler kind of design.
Sure.
Where you have like it's the face, but it's just a giant version of the face. The only part I was really kind of annoyed at a little bit, and this is just, you know, probably credit to the game for making it more challenging, was the acid rain part of Moreau. That part kind of like, because there are areas to go under the buildings, but then like there's some areas where you like have nowhere to go, and then Ethan puts his hands up to like cover it, and you like have no idea, you can't even see what's happening.
So for me, I mean, because I just stayed in that one first area, there's just like one very clear spot to hide.
Yeah.
So I never had too much issues with it. I was fine with it. It's a good just like breaking up the phase, each phase of the fight.
Yeah.
Although sometimes like, especially if you're playing on casual and you got like the infinite ammo and you're speedrunning it, you can end that fight in like 10 seconds, which is pretty fun.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, it's a pretty fairly simple, straightforward fight. Yeah. One cool thing though, again talking about exploration from before, is this section is fairly linear, pretty short. However, once you drain that area and the boss fight's over, if you double back, kind of go to the section where you first get the boat.
Yeah.
There's a whole place to explore. Yep. There's like the water's gone, so now you can kind of go out to where it was, where the lake was, and there's some fish you can find. There's some of the goats of warding that you can get, some of those collectibles. There's like a whole bunch of stuff that you can grab there.
Yeah.
Which is cool. So don't forget.
So I actually never did that on my first playthrough, but my second playthrough I did. I never went back, but I did. I forgot that, because there's a part before you get on the boat for the first time, you can see there's a treasure like out in the middle, and you can't get to it. I completely forgot about it by that point, and then but then by the time I remembered to double back, it was like after the factory, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna be, or after the stronghold, and I'm like, okay, I just want to finish this. But yeah. But yeah, that's Moreau, and then it kind of leads into you pick up the key, and then TV comes on, and
Heisenberg's talking to you, which I think is the second time he chats with you, or maybe it's the first time he chats with you through the TV.
Yeah.
So this starts setting up for not quite, but like you're starting to like be put on the path towards basically the point of no return. Not quite there yet, but now it's just Heisenberg you're worrying about, and he's like, all right, like, here's what you got to do. So the first thing, you got to go to the stronghold. You got to get the thing from the stronghold, and then I think it's the final flask is there, and then that's how you can access the factory.
Yep.
So stronghold's fairly short. It's mostly just there's a short area flooded with enemies. It is like my first playthrough. This was the ammo sink. This was where I lost like almost all of my ammo, which then is culminating in a boss fight where I'm like, well, crap. I don't have a whole lot left. So I had to use some magnum ammo there, which I was not happy with. But any thoughts in general on the stronghold?
Yeah. the first thing I thought about when I was here, I was looking at the challenges later about they're not part of trophies, but like one of the challenges for like completion points is like, oh, kill this many enemies or whatever with these different weapons, and I'm like, oh, dude, the stronghold is like prime for that.
That's true. That's very true.
I actually kind of enjoyed it, most because it just kind of like a little bit allows you just to let loose a little bit and just like mow and just get a bunch of money from killing all these different lichens and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't really have too much to say. Like, definitely, I'm a person in video games who likes to murder everything. I guess, like even with like Resident Evil 4, that's why I love it, because like you can murder
even
like
babies, man.
Even babies. Yeah, I was wanting to murder that dang baby in the basement, man. But yeah, I just I liked it in a way that I could just gain gold or lei or whatever they call it, that currency.
There is that area
it's
towards
so
the
early.
end of it.
Oh yeah.
I think after you beat the boss of the stronghold, there's was a long hallway that is just crystal.
Yeah, I was doing my speed run and I was running through that area and I'm like, nope. I got plenty of time. I'm gonna shoot all these down and get all this extra money.
So it's interesting as I'm trying to think back, and I might be forgetting something. So like a lot of the valuables in this game are crystal, or like when you beat like a mini boss or something, or even a boss, they devolve into the like.
Yeah.
There's just like a big crystal essence that they leave behind that you can then sell for a lot of lei.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, again, I might be forgetting a document. I'm wondering if they ever like explained the crystal connection to this.
I don't know.
Because there is and I'm blanking on the name. I think it's like the Cadou. I think CADOU is like what they're using to experiment on people with. So I'm wondering, I imagine there's some kind of connection there, but I don't remember if there was an explanation for it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, you can you kind of barrel through that. You fight the big axe dude again. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you just kind of pour things into them. This was really I would say the stronghold is really the first time I ever used the like grenade, the launcher. I hadn't used the launcher like at all until that point.
I think
then
it's
we have the big old groups of people that just went into them.
If you're going through that stronghold trying to kill all the enemies, or at least when you get to the stronghold proper and you're trying to like take out everyone, like it just feels like at some point, like, you have to use everything. It's like, well, out of handgun ammo, shotgun. All right, I'm out of. All right, grenade. Like, and then you get to the boss, and it's like, all right, magnum time, I guess. I wanted to save this, but.
And this is a little bit of a side note. This is that kind of cycle, and which is why I loved Resident Evil 4, and which is also why I love things like Ratchet and Clank, where it's like, oh, okay, I'm using this weapon, I upgraded it. Now I'm moving on to the next weapon. Oh, I'm out of ammo for this weapon. Moving on to the next one to upgrade that one. So when I feel like it is that kind of cycle, like, okay, here's this next section. I'm going to try and just be primarily handgun. If I have to use a little bit of shotgun, I can use a little bit of shotgun, but I'm going to like not use any magnum here,
Right.
I love that kind of repetition cycle of it all. And I think that's something this section did really well. Where it's like, I picked up 30 handgun. Okay, now I can use that a little bit. And
we're also like not quite there yet, but with one thing I really like about the factory is, given the kinds of enemies you fight there, like I had to use everything.
Mm-hmm.
Not like I had to use all my ammo, but I had to use all the tools at my disposal. Like you get, flashbang grenades, just regular like grenades. You get mines. Like in any other game, I never used mines, but like they were really, really useful in the factory. So I loved that. Yeah,
that's true. I used them in the factory. That was the only time.
I loved that, like, there were parts of this game that like I had to use the tools that it gave me. And a lot of times, I feel like a lot of games, it's like, oh, you can easily get by just using 2 of the things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a bunch of stuff you can just ignore. I liked that in this game you couldn't.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, on infinite ammo playthroughs, it's a little different, but like in your first run, no super upgrades or anything like that. Like, you got to use that stuff, and I found that to be really enjoyable. I feel the same way about the stronghold that I do Moreau's section, which is like, they're fairly linear. One's very action heavy, the other's just like a pretty linear just boss encounter.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing we haven't mentioned about RE Village yet is that it's got really good pacing.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I've seen.
Flows.
I've heard a lot of people complain about pacing, but I think it's done really, really well.
I could not disagree more to
Yeah.
those people. I think this game is paced really, really well, and I think, you know, to its credit of like the Moreau section is like it doesn't overstay its welcome. It even the Donna stuff too. Like that game, that part is fairly brief. You're not doing it for a super long time. I think that's really the case for like every like individual section of this game.
Yeah.
Is like none of these go on super long.
Yeah.
They're there like, and especially your first playthrough when you don't know what to do. Like you can be in each individual section for like a decent chunk of time, at least an hour. Moreau section maybe 40 minutes or so.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't think any of these things like overstay their welcome, which I really appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get through the stronghold, you do get the fourth and final flask.
Yep.
And this is when Heisenberg again talks to you through a TV.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, all right. He's like, put the four flask in, the chalice, you'll figure it out. Come see me in the stronghold. It's like, all right.
Yeah.
All right. So, should be stated, I believe once you enter the stronghold, that is the point of no return. There is no more village exploration you can do at that point.
When you put when you put the flasks in, I think it's it.
Oh, that might be the case.
Because I think I was able to go a few other places afterwards.
Yep.
But yeah.
So, put the flask in. There's a bridge that raises up. The factory, Collin. This is very quickly. You meet Heisenberg for the first time since early in the game, face to face, and he does the classic. He makes the appeal.
Yeah.
He's like, "Hey, you got it all wrong, bud. You and me, we're not that different." That whole kind of spiel.
Right.
So basically, he's super not into the way things have been going. He doesn't like that he's kind of one of Miranda's puppets, essentially.
Yeah.
He wants to take her down too, but he wants to use Rose to do it, and so that is obviously what Ethan has an issue with. So he says no. We get a little we hear a very loud roar of sorts from below in the factory that Heisenberg kind of shouts out a few times, and then eventually he kind of gives us one more option to be like, hey, take my deal. We refuse.
I thought it was so stupid when he opens the door where he falls down and he puts the chair right next to it. And it's like, oh, sit down, Ethan. And Ethan's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just sit right here next to the area where I'm going to fall. But anyways, I thought that cutscene was cool when Heisenberg's using the knife and he's going through each of the pictures. Yeah. He's like, the crazy bitch. And then he throws the knife. And then he's like, the crazy doll maker, and throws it at that one. And then talks about Moreau. And then does the big slash through Mother Miranda. I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, this is the kind of part where I actually started liking not only Heisenberg, but a little bit of Ethan's character too. I felt like when, he's, there's the part even in the castle when Lady D's like, oh, I'm coming for you. And then Ethan's like, oh, do your worst kind of thing. And even with, Heisenberg in that moment where he's just saying, do your worst, or I'll deal with it. Whatever you've got, I'll deal with it. Where I just feel like this is just a guy who's just, if he just does not fear death anymore, I feel like. And I don't know why, but I kind of liked that a little bit, where he's not just an idiot, I guess, anymore. Where it's hey, I'm just trying to get through this, and if I die, I die, but I'm doing the best I can. Yeah, I know. And even when he sees Chris, again, he's like, just finish it, just kill me, end me, please. Yeah, you find. I heard the chainsaws, and I was expecting a big old chainsaw person call back to Resident Evil 4. But it's a 12 chainsawed person.
You get Airman.
Yeah. yeah, it's true.
He's got I guess a propeller, basically.
I'll buy that Capcom DLC for $1.99.
Yeah.
Turn him into Airman. Yeah.
So yeah, the factory is interesting because it's similar to the castle in that it's, this big area, got some puzzles, kind of, things wrap in on itself. But what's cool about it is its structure is like I think it's like 3 or 4 floors. And they all kind of converge on this big elevator shaft.
Yeah.
And that is where the merchant is. That's where the Duke is just hanging out in this giant elevator, which is so cool. But that's kind of how the level works. Is like as you're progressing through, you always wrap back around on the next floor of the elevator.
Yeah.
So you can always like call the elevator up. You have the Duke. You get your shop. You buy some stuff, and then you keep going. And then of course, once you get the items you need, you then go back. You go back to the elevator. You then go back down, and that's when things start kind of wrapping in on themselves, and there's like backtracking.
Yeah.
It's like I thought that stuff was cool, but the other thing in this area, Collin, I think probably the part that's like divisive, is the enemies you fight are pretty nasty. So what's cool
Like
about the factory
robotic,
is
basically.
they're all robotic. They've got like energy cores in their center. So there's like a lot more to taking these guys down than any enemies you fought so far. Now lore-wise, like it's really interesting because as you're progressing through the factory, you're getting all these documents from Heisenberg talking about all these experiments, and like the way he writes and talks about the experiments are really kind of eye-opening.
Yeah, like, there was a voice recording of one of them, I think, in a secret area. Yeah.
Most of the time, he's just like they're all failures. And so like the way he talks about them. What did you think of the factory overall? I mentioned earlier, like I really enjoyed that it really made me use everything at my disposal to get through. Like especially the enemies that were like heavily armored. Like you had to use the mines and grenades for them essentially.
Yeah.
Unless you're in casual or like I guess normal to an extent, you could probably break through some of that stuff. But generally speaking, you needed to use those explosives.
Yeah, I still think the factory is kind of my least favorite part of the game, and it kind of sucks that like when you're doing these subsequent playthroughs, you're like, it's at the very end, and like I don't want to do it. Like I wish I'd rather be like front loaded so I can just forget about it at that point. Yeah, I think enemy wise, I think it's fine because you have the guy with like the chainsaw, like Big Daddy drill, and then you get another one that's got drill on each hand, where you're shooting the weak parts. The one thing I will say about the factory that I weirdly kind of liked was this is like such a weird complaint, though. I fully understand that. But like you go to the castle, what are you doing? You're going down. You're going down, down, down. You go to the dollhouse, where do you go? Downstairs. You go to Moreau's windmill, where do you go? And downstairs. It's like I felt like the factory was one where it's like, oh, I'm actually going up now. Like you're going actually going up now instead of just down, 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 and
one thing
down.
I will say, so when you first get to the factory, you kind of fall down into like a trash compactor room or whatever.
Yeah.
So you climb out of that. You kind of go up. There's like a chase sequence pretty quickly, but at some point you climb. I think you climb up a ladder, and you kind of emerge out into this like open area, and you see all of the like. One, you have to wonder how many people is he experimenting on, because there's a shot where you see like potentially hundreds of them like hanging on these rafters like in the distance.
There's a trophy for one of them too.
There is if you shoot one of them down.
Yeah.
It gave me heavy like Final Fantasy VII vibes, like visually, when you're going through like the reactors.
Sure, I get that. Yeah.
It was like I think again, one thing I want to praise RE8 for is just its diversity in locations. There's like so many. You just went to so many different places, right? And like just visually diverse areas, like the factory especially.
Yeah.
It looks so radically different from everywhere else you've gone. What I will say, and I think we disagree maybe a little bit on this, is so Resident Evil typically is like it's kind of just a thing now that the back half of the game is usually the weakest. It's typically how it goes, right?
Yeah.
I actually think the factory is like really good and one of the better parts, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So yeah, those enemies pretty tough, but again, like a lot of explosives and stuff that you're using, um, without being too like action heavy, right? While still like being pretty puzzle centric. Like the factory is very maze like. I think more so than the castle. I think it's super easy to get lost in the factory.
Yes, yeah, I got lost.
Especially the first time. Like having gone through it a few times now, like I feel a little more comfortable. But definitely like the first couple playthroughs, there's a part where you're like right towards the end of the factory. A lot of the factory is built around getting these molds so that you can make, you can put the molds in this machine and it will make an item for you. Mm-hmm. So towards the end, you get the mold to make the Heisenberg key, and that's like what you need to get kind of get to the section that will lead out of the factory.
Yeah.
And at that point, you have to go all the way back kind of towards the beginning to put the mold in to make the key. And like I kept getting lost at that part my first couple runs. But otherwise, I'm feeling a little more confident now. But it is a very maze-like and very easy to just get lost.
Yeah, and I think maybe another part why I don't like the factory as much, where like, I mean, yeah, you're mentioning how like, you know, the kind of, you know, the beautiful like vista kind of area where you can look and see like every part of the factory, but I also just felt like it just felt too collapsed or whatever. Like, you know, not necessarily I was getting claustrophobic, but there wasn't as much to look at, I guess, in the factory because it was just very dark most of the time. And
honestly, like so much of the factory felt like it was pulled from Evil Within.
I totally get that. You expected like the safe head guy to show. Yeah, and even that
honestly, it would not be out of place in location like the factory.
Yeah,
it's interesting like have the Evil Within be a game that was like very RE4, and then for like RE8 to come out and be very RE4, but then like also like I think very much taking inspiration from Evil Within in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Which is great. Great game to take inspiration from as well as RE4.
It's like what Capcom's like, what's Shinji Mikami doing? Oh, let's just copy off his new game. Yeah. I know
and to be fair, RE8 has like I feel like pieces of every Resident Evil in this game.
Yeah. Sure.
It's like it ate all of them up.
Yeah.
Anyways,
okay.
So you fight Airman.
Yeah. He runs into a wall, you shoot him in the back, then he runs into another wall and you shoot him in the back again.
So, yeah, the room starts out and it's just like basically a maze of like walls. Mm-hmm. And very quickly, like you hear him and then he just starts rampaging and knocking through all these walls. It's the classic boss that like charges at you, hits the wall and is there for a few moments and you shoot his back.
Yeah.
This time though, Airman will catch fire.
Yeah. And then he'll breathe fire at you a little bit.
Yeah, and then he'll charge at you.
Yeah. And I don't know. That was probably the worst boss fight. I think.
I guess.
I don't know.
I mean, like, I almost consider him a mini boss, but like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. Yeah.
I will say, so I don't mind him too much. On the Village of Shadows difficulty, even with like maxed out best magnum infinite ammo, like still took a while because on Village of Shadows he doesn't get stuck on the wall as long, so you don't have as much chance to like shoot at his back, so it just kind of inherently takes a longer
Dang,
which is like, you know,
breaking my heart because I recently did just have the whatever magnum that starts with an S and had it fully upgraded with infinite ammo. I was hoping I could just roll through Village of Shadows like super easy, but
I mean you will be able to.
Okay.
That fight is one of like 2 to 3 sections that are kind of rough.
Okay. Gotcha.
But otherwise it's not too bad.
Okay. Gotcha.
Granted, the other sections are coming up. So
yeah.
So you do that fight, and then you run into Chris. You do that fight, you get back up to Heisenberg.
Yeah.
And Heisenberg knocks you right back down.
And guess what? Yeah, I guess what I thought. I laughed out loud at that part because I'm like, at that point, I'm like, we're just going down. That's all we're doing in this game. We're going down. And then we're like, we're going down again. And I'm like, oh no. And then of course,
Ethan even makes a comment. He's like, oh, I'm going to have to do all that again.
I know. I was like, yep.
But he walks into this room and he runs into Chris Redfield.
Yep.
And this is where you start to get a decent amount of like exposition of what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
This already tells you that Mia was not Mia at the beginning.
Yeah.
That
You think I killed Mia?
Yeah. Mother Miranda has the ability, we learn. So here's the like leading up, not quite up to this point, leading up towards the end of the game. My thought process, Colin, was like, okay, I'm pretty sure, like I've assumed this from the get go that like Mia was not actually going to stay dead.
Right.
I was like, I hadn't really figured out like what they were going to do.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking like, okay, clearly something's up. Like clearly it won't be Mia. And I think shortly before you meet Chris, there was a document. I believe this is how it works out. There's like a little bit before you meet him. There's a document where that you can find that talks about how Mother Miranda has the ability to
like shapeshift. Yeah.
I believe it is right before you meet Chris.
Okay.
Because I remember seeing that and thinking, oh, that's it.
Gotcha.
That's what it's gonna be.
Yeah.
So that's what you learn is that she disguised herself as Mia, and that's why they came in to try to kill her because she wanted to kidnap Rose.
Yeah.
What they didn't know is that she could also disguise herself as a corpse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like that's how they phrased it, but I guess what they mean is like she could just play dead, like
right.
because she wouldn't.
Yeah.
Or I guess she could like stop her heart from beating. I don't know. So she convinced them that she was dead, but she wasn't. And so when you're being taken away, that's how the truck kind of falls over and like everyone, all the other like military men die, and then my assumption is that she tries to kill Ethan there. But then Ethan wakes up because he can survive.
Oh,
that's kind of the
I
assumption
gotcha.
I'm working with.
Yeah.
And then he wakes up in the middle of the night and she's been long gone.
Yeah.
So you learn about that. You learn that, Chris, he isn't a bad guy. He's just trying to do what he does. He's making mistakes, which is cool.
So here's the part where I thought this was going to take a turn when he goes, oh, I guess I'll owe you an explanation. And then he goes, hand me that wrench. And I'm like, oh no, Chris is going to knock me out. Like I figured I was going to hand Chris the wrench and Chris was going to take it and he was going to hit me over the head with it.
Yeah.
But that's not what happens. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
So he lays it out for you. And then there's some discussion. And he's like, all right, go after, I'll stay here doing what I'm doing. Go after Heisenberg. Take this. And he motions towards a giant tank.
Mm-hmm.
This tank is made of polymer something.
Polycarbonate or something?
I don't know, but basically, the implication is that it is some... So Heisenberg can control metal objects. This is what we learn. And I think the implication is that this tank is made of some kind of like a type of material that he can't control. So we can use that.
We've seen the X-Men movies where they try to fight Magneto.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's basically that.
Yes.
So you hop in the tank. You hop in the giant elevator. Duke is not there anymore.
Yeah.
He's long gone.
Yeah.
You back in the elevator.
Yeah.
You take it all the way up to the outside, and there's just a huge arena behind the factory, and it's just you. It's you in a tank, and then Heisenberg that has turned into a giant metal monstrosity.
Yeah, and then
Colin, thoughts on this fight?
I want to say it's cool, but at the same time, you're just shooting the red parts, and then he throws you up in the air, and then he throws you out of the tank, and then you just shoot him some more until there's a set
half
piece
the
moment
half the
it.
fight's the tank, half the fight is just you with your weapons. So I want to talk about Village of Shadows.
Oh, okay.
So this fight is pretty tough on Village of Shadows, but I also think I mentioned earlier, like you've got to guard. Like so, the tank guarding with the tank is straight up a chainsaw, which is hilarious. You have to guard. You have to you have to actively do the boss fight. I think the way it's intended.
Yeah.
Which is not just constantly shooting. So I really liked it, and I think you have a machine like a Gatling gun, and you got like a rocket launcher on this tank, and the rocket launcher has like a cooldown, so you want to use that on the red glowing bits, so at least on Village of Shadows, there's a lot of timing when you would use that because he will charge at you. So generally, like, you'd want to wait until he's about to charge at you. That way you can use a rocket launcher. Once you blow up one of the red bits, it, like, stuns them for a second.
Yeah.
So, like, on Village of Shadows, it was all about keeping distance. And the best way to do that was to wait for the right time to use that rocket.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually really enjoyed the boss fight.
Okay.
On that playthrough. Otherwise, I was like, the pure insanity of the whole thing, I was just like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And I will accept it because everything else has been very classical Resident Evil and not super over the top.
Yeah.
At least on this angle. So I was pretty cool with it. There's a really great line in the boss fight, Collin, if you would like to.
Oh, okay. That's what I was gonna mention. I was just like, oh well, because that's after you get knocked off your tank. Mm-hmm. Heisenberg literally is just about to kill you. Then Chris sends the factory up in flames. He's like, my metal army. And he's like, oh, I'm gonna kill that boulder punching asshole or something like that. And I was telling you that I kind of had a YouTube thumbnail spoil that for me. But I just think it's a pretty funny moment too. I didn't know when it was. Again, I didn't know when it was going to happen, but yeah, I thought it was
just nods to all the games.
Yeah, but then of course my immediate thought, I was like, oh, how does Heisenberg know about that? Is Heisenberg somebody? Yeah. Then I'm like, oh, how would he know that? Is Heisenberg Wesker?
Well, he's known all over.
Yeah.
So yeah, that fight happens. It's crazy, just a completely crazy fight. I will say again, it's on Village of Shadows. That fight is long. I was able to beat it my second time, so I didn't have too much trouble with it. But it's a long fight, and you definitely have to approach it maybe a little bit different than you would the other playthroughs.
Not looking forward to it.
It's not too bad. It's not the part that you shouldn't be not looking forward to.
Like how long did it take you to beat it?
Oh, I mean, like maybe 5 or 6 minutes. It's not terribly long.
Okay,
but it's noticeably longer.
Okay, because this is coming from the person who platinum Final Fantasy VII Remake and spent like 45 minutes on like a challenge mode boss and died.
Yeah, so it's definitely it's long enough to be like, man, this guy just keeps going.
Okay. I didn't know how long I would have to invest into a situation and then die
after this fight. You were just sitting in this big open area, trying to talk to Chris, and then that's when she shows up.
Yep.
Oh, Mother Miranda.
Mia.
I guess Mia does show up briefly, right?
I was just gonna say Jill Valentine shows up. No.
Yeah. It's old Mother Miranda. Yeah. As Heisenberg calls her.
Yeah. You get to see a little bit of her shape shifting in action because didn't she? She originally shows up as Mia, and then
I think so. And so basically, she just pulls your heart out of your body.
Yeah, you find out the old lady was also the crazy lady was also Mother Miranda at the same time, which makes sense. Do that. Which makes sense because like even replaying it again after that house burns down at the beginning of the game, you open the door. And then you see Mother Miranda killing somebody. Then you run through the field, and the next area, there's the old lady right there. Like, you can just see that she just walked over there and changed form and stuff like that. But
so it's definitely a cool moment of like you flashing back to those scenes, and you're like, oh, okay, she was kind of guiding me along. All right.
Yeah.
But she just pulls your heart out, which I think if you think about it, if you have a character who could just reattach limbs and kind of live through having drills drilled into his body, I think taking the person's heart out is probably a pretty good strategy.
Yeah.
Now,
but here's the thing, Curtis.
Yeah.
She didn't aim for the head.
She didn't aim for the head. Just classic mistake. Even the gods make them. So, Colin, I want to get your thoughts. So this happens. Mm-hmm. She's laughing, right? Blood all over her face, drinking the blood of your heart.
Yeah.
I guess. You fall to the ground, screen fades to black, kind of a pause, and you get a scene with Chris talking to someone else and basically reporting the death of Ethan Winters.
Yeah.
What were you thinking at this point?
Well, I figured at some point Ethan was going to die. I didn't know it was going to be that quick. I full on expected you kill Heisenberg, then you kind of regroup, and then I figured it was going to be something more like Ethan's going to be like, oh, we found Chris was gonna be like, "Oh, we found Mother Miranda over here," and Chris was like, "No, or Ethan's gonna say, no, I'm going by myself, and I'm gonna end this now." And you know what I mean? I thought it was gonna be that kind of like mistake, but no, it was like she just shows up and murders you. Yeah, I didn't expect there to necessarily be a fight, but was kind of surprised at how fast it was. Whenever they said at the very, like, even in some of the marketing, I felt like it wasn't pronounced a lot, but their whole thing was like, this is the end of Ethan Winter's story.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, he's dying. Like,
right.
at some point he's dying. Right?
So
yeah. Long did we know he already died.
Yeah. Spoilers. So at this moment, we then take on control of Chris Redfield.
Yep. As we did in Not a Hero, playing as Chris again.
Playing as Chris.
The cool...
Back in the mainline Resident Evil game. Here we go.
Yep. Nazi zombies. Call of Duty showed up.
This whole sequence... just, I think from this point on, from the tank on, this game goes off the rails.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way, I don't think, either. Like, in a way that I'm generally pretty chill with. So you're playing as Chris. He's got his whole, like... Oh, man, I don't remember the name of his group.
Oh.
Wolfhounds or something.
Yeah, I might be able to find it here in a sec.
There's basically a bunch of individuals that we'll probably never see again. They have names, but I don't remember any of them. They don't really, like... They're just there for this.
One of them was like Umber Eyes was a code name or something like that.
So they, the village is like in flames. There's tentacle monsters all over. You know, Miranda's about to do the ceremony with Rose. So they're like, we gotta, like, Ethan's gone. We gotta get to Miranda. We gotta take her out. This is it.
Chris is a smoker now.
Chris is, Punish Chris.
Yes. Yep. I don't know why I like this. Like, I shouldn't like someone smoking, but I love, like, the way he was like smoking just reminded me of just the Metal Gear Solid 4
he's like, it's like
loading screens.
He's like, how long is it? Like, when's this gonna end? And someone's like, what, sir? And he's like, 3 years. I've been trying to put this thing in the ground.
Yep.
3 years too long. And it's like, yes, I like this, Chris.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's another like. You're going through the village, but it's like a very, very linear, straightforward. There's a ton of lichens coming at you. Apologies, my cat is scratching at chairs and everything. So yeah, just tons of lichens coming at you.
Too.
Mowing them down. He's got like, we talk a lot about like, or we don't, I guess, but there's always like conversations about Resident Evil games and other survival horror games with characters like this, where it's like they never come prepared. Like Chris came prepared.
Yep.
He's got like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of like ammo, all these weapons. He's got grenades. He's got everything. Well equipped.
Injection things.
Well equipped for the mission. Which I think is cool because again, for the sequences in this game where this game goes crazy, like this last like hour basically. It's in the context of a game where the majority of it is like your typical survival horror, pretty low key stuff. So I'm generally, whereas Resident Evil 6 was like 100% all the time. I was okay with these moments. I was okay with like the people are referring to the Chris section as the Call of Duty mission. Like I was pretty okay with it because it's a very, very short segment in a much longer game.
Yeah.
What I will tell you. The Village Shadows difficulty, the Chris section is probably the worst part.
Really? Yeah, because you're not really doing... Yeah, it's going to be the same for everybody. You don't have, like, upgraded weapons and stuff that.
It's not terrible. It's mostly... So the end... It's a pretty short section. The end of the section, you have to use... he's got this, like, laser pointer.
Yeah.
Where you have someone in the air who's, like, sending down, like, missiles, basically. Yeah. So there's a specific place you've got to blow up so you can get underground. You got to do it 3 times, and as you're in between each time, there's like swarms of enemies coming at you. And so you basically just have to take enough of them out so you have the laser pointer takes, I think it's like 7 or 8 seconds to charge fully. So you basically just have to give yourself enough space to charge that up. On Village of Shadows, it's a lot harder to do that. It took me a couple times. Again, it's not too bad, but it's probably the hardest part of that entire run. That or the tank fight. But I
Okay.
think the Chris fight in particular is probably the worst of it.
Weirdly, slight spoilers for the Resident Evil 3 remake. What
Yeah.
you platinum that, right?
Yeah.
What is more annoying, the Chris
The final
section?
boss of Resident Evil 3.
Okay, I was gonna ask. That's exactly what I was gonna ask.
By far.
Okay, that's exactly what I was gonna ask.
This
on
is
Inferno
not that bad.
is awful. On Inferno.
So
Yes.
when you blow up that section, Chris goes underground, and there's that big monster again.
Yeah, with the
That
spiky
Arias or whatever.
mace or whatever.
He takes some time in Village of Shadows as well.
And the knife run you said as well.
The knife run takes a long time, but in Village of Shadows, even like just laying into him and using the like laser pointer to hit him with missiles, like he takes like 4 or 5 missiles to take down. So it takes a while as well.
That's crazy. Yeah. I didn't know that.
I think it's 4. If you're also like just laying into him with your rifle in between.
Yeah,
it takes a while.
I have not
once
played
you're
this
past
game. I've played this game on nothing but casual, so this is going to be fun.
That should be fun. Once you're past that, the final boss in Village of Shadows is not too bad.
Okay.
If you've got the right infinite ammo and stuff.
Yeah.
So you've beat that boss as Chris. You go under. There's a giant. You find the metamycite.
Mm-hmm.
So what you realize, this is the connection to 7, is that this is basically the origin of the mold. That it was then brought over. I think the implication is like the ship that you find in 7 is probably what was transporting the mold, and that's how it got to Louisiana from Europe.
Because Evelyn was on that ship.
Because Evelyn was on the ship.
Tested on or whatever.
Yeah, so what they come to find is like this is the origin spot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a giant like beating heart underground, which is the metamycite. So Chris attaches like an explosive to it. So he's like, all right, we gotta get once we're done with Miranda, we gotta get out of here because we're blowing the place sky high. It's another staple of Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Just blowing the whole place up.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that Resident Evil games like to do, Collin, is Chris walks. Very similar. So Chris walks into this room, and that's where we get the lore dump.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's the room before the final boss, essentially. There's all sorts of documents all over the place. We talked about the umbrella reveal earlier. This is where there's a document for each of the 4 lords.
Yep.
So it goes talks a little bit about them. They're all Miranda written documents, and that is where we find Mia.
Yeah. Where Chris even says like, "Where's Miranda right now?" Because like he's assuming that he's like Miranda shapeshifted again.
Again, well prepared.
Yeah. I thought that was a cool moment. I like that. But yeah, you find out that Miranda's there. One thing I think that's Mia is there. One thing I thought was interesting is after you kill the thing as the big mace ball dude, some of your teammates are talking about how did Miranda know that Rose was there and stuff like that. I wonder if that's like maybe another plot point that they'll maybe uncover at some point. I thought that was kind of
maybe
interesting, but yeah, you kind of get the illusion where, or I guess you hear the part where Chris basically has to tell Mia that Ethan's dead, and then you get the part
she's
where
like, "Where's my husband?"
Yeah,
and he tells her, and then Mia, she's like, "I wanted to keep this hidden."
Yeah,
and you're like, okay. And she's like, "You don't know how special he is."
Yeah, something like that.
And you're like, all right.
Then of course we even do get that line right before about like there wasn't time, and it's like you should have told him. Like that's in a weird way that's like my favorite line in the game. About Chris not telling Ethan, but then like them having like this guy saying like either way you should have told him. Like I feel like that might be my favorite line in the game. But yeah, then you kind of wake up in a dream-like state, playing as Ethan. It's really cold out. You walk forward a little bit. You kind of breathe into your hands a little bit, and then you hear a familiar voice, and it's good old Evelyn from Resident Evil 7. Did you like this section at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good like. I mentioned earlier that they give context for why Ethan is the way he is, and this is when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that they did. I love that they did actually, and I thought this was a good time for it. I thought the way that they did it was fine. So Evelyn basically is like kind of taunting and teasing you, and that's when it's revealed that you've she has this line. She's like, "Didn't you think it was weird? Like, didn't you think it was weird that all these really awful things were happening? Like your hand chopped off. Like she's like, no matter how much you got hurt, you just keep getting back up. Like, didn't you think that was strange?" And I feel like that's just like that's one. It's a line to Ethan, but also I feel like it's a line to the player.
Yeah.
Where like I think up to this point, obviously like in 7, there's like there's like some contextualization around it, like you kind of understand why, but it's never fully explained and elaborated on. Mm-hmm. And I feel like up to this point, you just kind of accept it. You're like, yeah, Resident Evil is just kind of weird. It gets a little goofy. This is just one of those things.
Yeah.
I was like, it's a video game. It's a game. And so I love that, like, it's kind of a line to the player, too, of like, hey, we know you thought it was odd.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the truth. And so the reveal that you've been dead, like Jack Baker
killed you,
or Joe or whoever, like
it's Jack. Yeah,
Jack killed you.
Yeah,
like you died and then you became Mold Man.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah, I thought of it. I really enjoyed that too. Yeah, I just thought it was cool, like seeing Evelyn. The music really did it for me in this moment. Mm-hmm. It wasn't super pronounced, but I really like the music when you're like talking to Evelyn here. I just felt like it really showed how much like Ethan had been through, and even though he's a mold monster now, he's like doing so much just to fight for like the things that he cares about. And yeah, it did explain, because I was talking to you the other day about like there were so many times I got hit and I'm like, oh, that's a 1-hit kill. Oh, I just got stabbed in the chest by a drill guy. Okay, I'm dead. And it's like, and then like even when you first meet those beasts and they're like ripping you apart, and I'm like, oh, you're just fine. Like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. Still think it's weird that I guess Ethan can regrow a heart, but he can't regrow his hands, like the hand that got bit off.
Yeah,
I found that kind of interesting. Like, I figured him to come back and still have that, but no.
So one thing it does that it has caused me to wonder is this game is pretty graphic. Like Ethan goes through a lot. Like you there's some pretty like intense violence towards Ethan, right?
It's like torture basically.
Even
it's like
in cutscenes. Yeah, tortured. Like it's pretty intense. Yeah. And so I do wonder, like, because they have like a very contextualized reason for why, and why he can survive it and be fine, mostly fine, is like I wonder in the future, like, will we not see that in other Resident Evil games? Like, if we play as Rose, like, will Rose go through that kind of stuff, or will they shy away from it? I'd imagine they would. Like, and I'm talking specifically like hands getting chopped off, or like there's a sequence with the daughters at the beginning of the castle where they have like hooks. And they like,
Yep. You just pull your hands off and you're fine.
Yeah.
After you pour medicine on you.
Yeah. So I don't know. I wonder about that. After that sequence, there's a little dream sequence. You wake up in the back of the Duke's carriage.
Yeah.
And
you tell
there's a little scene with him, and
I want to go to Miranda. It's like, oh, I figured you'd say that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Where he's like, oh, I'm already way ahead of you.
Yeah.
We're almost there. He's like, yes, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's the part where like Ethan's like, all right, who or what even are you? And I love where he's like, to be honest, I don't really know myself. I don't or I don't remember exactly what he says, but he's just like, I'm not really sure. He's like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
So we're playing as Ethan again. Final boss. Here we go. We got the shop there, so we can buy some last minute items. But otherwise, it's you kind of walk up a hill, walk to the final boss.
Fight like 3 enemies for some reason. I thought that was kind of weird. That you're
you can run by them.
Yeah, I know, but I just thought that was weird.
They like fall to the ground. So yeah.
Yeah.
So, final boss, Mother Miranda.
Rose is complete now.
Rose is complete. Time to put into everything.
Yeah.
Trying to save your daughter. 1v1 showdown. Collin, thoughts?
Not my favorite boss fight. I mean, it's a boss fight, and I guess it's a final boss fight, but
Okay.
I didn't feel like I felt like the other boss fights, maybe other than I don't know, maybe even other than Moreau, I felt like had more of a spectacle to it. I felt like those felt like more impactful. More the only part I felt like it wasn't as impactful I was impactful in the Mother Miranda was when like it goes black and white basically, and she kind of like attacks you really quickly, and does like a lot of damage when she does.
Sure.
That's probably like the only part I suppose that I was like. I mean, I actually recently just played it. This morning I had on casual. I played with infinite Magnum, upgraded all the way, and it literally died in like
All right.
7 shots.
So as someone who has played on more higher difficulty than casual,
please,
I think
please
this
tell
is
me.
I think this is one of the better boss fights, not just in the game, but probably one of the better final boss fights in a Resident Evil game.
Yeah, I just didn't think shooting the orb was all that great, I guess. I don't
think
know.
so. Well, here's the thing, right? Like a lot of Resident Evil games, the final boss, you can just kind of stand there and shoot them. Or, I mean, Resident Evil 1, my favorite, the final boss in that game is like you save the Magnum for it, you take him out in a couple hits, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one and done. Generally speaking, like this fight like has mechanics. There are phases in it. Like it's a full on like actual like well thought out boss fight.
Okay.
Where I think even like Moreau, you can totally skip. Like there's not really phases to Moreau. You could take him out really fast if you wanted to. I think on Spectacle, obviously the Heisenberg fight has everyone beat. Probably, but I actually really like this fight a lot. Again, just because like I think typically the ones I'm thinking of, not everyone, of course, but like a lot of Resident Evil final boss fights, it's like, well, there might be like some certain steps you need to take, but generally speaking, they're pretty simple and straightforward. I like that this one, like, there was some like DMC level design going on with her, with like the way Mother Miranda looked, like when she transformed into this like demon looking thing, which I really liked. But I like she has phases. Like there's like you're doing like each phase, like you've got to do different things. You got to block. Again, these games I never block, but it was fun to like kind of be required to, and like and have it work, right? Like and have it be a thing that like this is an actual strategy you should be following.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I like the boss fight quite a bit. It's okay. I think it's one of the more engaging final boss fights in a Resident Evil game.
Without a rocket launcher at the end too.
No rocket launcher.
Yeah, kind of.
A little surprising, but you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I thought we were gonna get more Chris in that fight because like Chris shows up and does the headshot on Miranda at the very beginning, but then like I thought was gonna do something else a little bit here and there. Like I mean, Chris was in the perfect position to throw you a rocket launcher at the very end of the game.
There's definitely a lot of like, and this is just stuff that you just kind of you brush aside because you're like, well, you know what it is, what it is. There's a lot of this game where you could be like, where are they?
Yeah.
Where is Chris and his gang?
Yeah.
During these moments,
DLC.
They could be, yeah. Yeah. Resident Evil 9 is just like the RE3 of this game.
But then it's also like just the fact that Chris and like Ethan by himself is able to do all of this that Chris and his entire team of professionals can't, kind of thing.
And you just kind of you're just like, all right, yeah, sure. Yeah. So you take down Mother Miranda, you save Rose. There's a sequence where Chris is like trying to get you out. But basically Ethan makes a choice to be left behind. He takes the like detonator away from Chris, switches it out for Rose. So Chris has Rose. He's like, oh, save her. And that's what happens. Yeah. Ethan's left behind to detonate and theoretically die in the explosion. Chris and Rose and Mia and all of Chris's gang, they escape on the chopper. And
you find out there's a dead BSAA thing.
Yeah. So when the Chris section starts, you see that the BSAA have also arrived. You see them arriving, and you get the hints of like animosity, right? That Chris is like maybe not super into the BSAA these days. Yeah. And you realize at the end of the game that they're sending in BOWs as their soldiers.
It's like a Suicide Squad kind of thing. Where
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah, basically.
Yeah.
To which this section ends on Chris saying, set plot coordinates for BSAA HQ.
In Europe, yep.
Someone's got to pay.
Yep.
Roll credits.
But like, I think it's weird that like how I don't know, because it's like, okay, Chris is gonna make him pay, but like, it's not like BSAA Europe was responsible for all this. They just sent it. You know what I mean? I don't know. That makes sense.
I think we'll find out.
Okay, because it's not, unless they were like trying to cover something up or whatnot. We still don't know who.
So I feel like there's heavy implications in this game that BSAA like
is turning into Umbrella in a way.
Is turning bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now again, there was like no real information on Blue Umbrella in this game.
Yeah.
No mention of them.
So
like,
no logo or anything. Yeah.
But I think that seems to be the implication. And so that happens. But before we talk too in depth about that, credits roll, and then we get a post-credits scene. This one sees a teenage Rose on the bus. She gets off the bus, is at a cemetery visiting the grave of Ethan, her dad. Mm-hmm. Talks to her dad a little bit. And then there's this agent pulls up, kind of honks his horn.
Yeah.
Rose is like, oh, talk of the devil. So this agent refers to Rose as Evelyn. She is not happy about.
I wouldn't be either.
And she goes like, do that again, and I'll show you things that Chris doesn't even know I can do.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right. Guy makes a comment that she's just like him, which I think referring to Ethan. She kind of like smiles, looks out the window. She's like, yeah, I know. Car pulls off. As it's driving away, car stops. There seems to be some kind of figure standing on the road beside this car.
Yeah.
And the scene kind of hangs on that image for a few moments before fading to black and game over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it looks like the car stops. Like the car looks like...
It definitely stops.
Yeah.
It absolutely stops next to this figure.
Yeah.
Collin, thoughts? Thoughts on BSAA? Chris, thoughts on this secret ending? Or not secret ending, but post-credits scene.
I prefer I think it'd be cool if the BSAA became evil or something like that. I think it'd be kind of cool, like different storyline. Mm-hmm. One thing I think it's interesting with the end of the game, or that cutscene with whatever, they call her Evelyn, but with Rose, where it's like, the guy even says, like, the guy on the radio is like, I got a shot if you need to, basically like, they're still watching Rose. Yeah. Like they just in case it's almost like the like I was thinking making another Avengers thing, like, they're going after the Hulk or something like that in the first Avengers, and it's like, hey, we're all doing great here, right? And it's like, no, like, we're ready to murder you if possible.
Part of the rumors about RE8 going into it, some of them being, hey, this is the end of Ethan's story. Part of the other rumors is that RE8, 7, 8, and 9 are intended to be a trilogy.
Yeah, and that's what I would assume so.
And also, the credits do end with, like, the father's story is done, is over. Yeah. Implying, like, oh, what about the daughter's story? Mm-hmm. There's heavy implications that Rose has powers.
Yep.
Of which we don't know yet. But I do, that line does stick out to me a lot of just, like, it's a quick one-off line, but I feel like it tells you everything you need to know.
Mm-hmm. That, she's still going to be kept in check. Like, doesn't matter what happens. Like, they're keeping an eye out. Like, they've almost got, like, a fail-safe plan that, like, if Rose starts doing things
you almost wonder, like,
then they can take her down.
You can even wonder if, like, maybe she even knows about it, too. Yeah. Or it's, like, something that's kind of, like, held over her. Maybe if she starts to get out of line, they're like, hey, don't forget there's a guy in a building over there.
Right.
Like, you totally see that. So, okay. I don't know how much I really, like, buy into this or when I lend credence to it at all, but there is apparently some people, I think on PC, was able to zoom in a bit on this character and this person that was standing on the road outside the vehicle.
Okay.
Do you know about this? Have we talked about this?
I don't think so. I don't know.
Okay, well, they were able to, like, I don't know how they, I don't know. I think they just broke free of the camera and was able to, like, get closer in.
Yeah.
It's Ethan's character model.
Okay. I mean, I figured that's who it's got to be, right? Like,
Yeah, so
I would.
there's been a lot of
Yeah.
like some speculation of like, oh, is he alive? Is it like a dream vision kind of thing, or like what's going on? I don't know how much I really want to like buy into it too much. I think I almost prefer a world in which Ethan is just gone
I think
and
so
dead.
too. Yeah.
But we'll see. Time will tell. Um, so I mean,
It's almost like they left it
overall,
open. It's like they almost left it open just in
yeah,
case. Like, oh, if we want to bring him back, there's an area to bring him back in. No.
yeah. So as we wrap up on this mammoth of a spoiler cast, Colin, what were your thoughts overall? Like, what would you score this, or how do you feel about Resident Evil Village?
I don't know. A solid 9 out of 10, maybe 9.5 out of 10. I mean, I think about, I'm like, yeah, I really enjoyed it. But then I think about like the last of the 4 previous Resident Evil games. I mean, I would probably put this above 7 and the 2 remakes.
Okay.
This is certainly the one where I've enjoyed the most playing. Where I feel like when I played 2 and 3, I'm just kind of like, ugh, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'll just put on a podcast and I'll just trudge through these and get these platinums. Where I feel like this one's like, oh, I'm actually upgrading and I can get this in-game currency and I'm buying this and buying completion points to get a new weapon and doing these different challenges and whatnot. I feel like I enjoy that a little bit more.
Sure.
I love feeling like, I think I love more of the completion part of it more than the actual story. I think, though, story-wise, I think this game is better than RE7. I think it's told better. And yeah, kind of talking about, you're mentioning just, even previous Resident Evil games not finishing the greatest. I mean, yeah, like the whole boat section I'd probably say, of Resident Evil 7 was really like kind of lackluster. So I felt like, other than the factory, I mean, I did think like the Stronghold was really good. The factory was not like, I don't know. I mean, saying the worst part of the game for me isn't saying like it's a, you know what I mean? It's
right. Yeah.
It's still pretty good, I would say.
If you're rating this game 9 or 9.5, like the worst part is like it's
yeah. I mean, that's the same thing. Like, I have a worst part of Resident Evil 4, but it's still my favorite game of all time. That kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I loved this game. I think what's interesting, so like if you really think back, these last, I mean, God, like I guess I'm trying to think of when Revelations 2 came out. I feel like Revelations
That's like
2,
2014, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right. So like I feel like that was the moment for me where it was like, okay, this is good. Like I like that. Like it's not maybe not like as high highs as some of the other better games in the series, but like this is really solid. And then it was right around that time, maybe a few years later, that it felt like Capcom kind of started up this renaissance that we're in now, right? Where they're just putting out bangers left and right now.
Yeah.
They have been for a few years, right?
Yeah.
Like between Monster Hunter and DMC5 and Resident Evil. Like it feels like they've, obviously they've had their misses here and there.
Yeah.
But, they've been putting out some really good stuff. And Resident Evil in particular, right? Like Revelations 2 was really, really solid, really good. And then RE7 hits, and RE7's like kind of a return to form. It's the things people have been wanting, and it's great, and everyone loves it. And it's in VR, and like that's a whole thing. And then, of course, Remake 2 hits. And that's like game of the year for people. Like people are losing their minds. And then Remake 3, did not review as well as 2, but still like a very good, very, very good game. And now you have Village. And I think for me, at least the last 4, right? So the 2 remakes, 7 and 8. Like the 2 remakes obviously are like, we're remaking already really good games. So it's a matter of like what do they play like? How are they? What do they change? What do they take away? But they're built on really solid foundations. And then 7 is obviously a return to classic, Resident Evil 1 style stuff. What's exciting, I think, of all of those 4, what's the most exciting, not just 8 in particular, but what's exciting about 8, as I mentioned before, I feel like it really lays the foundation for what the future of Resident Evil can be. I really like having this hub area with like different sections of the game just branching off from the hub and having them be kind of smaller, contained areas that you go between as you're progressing. And I like, as you return to the hub, there's more areas to explore. Like that gameplay loop really worked for me in this. and I feel like there's a really good opportunity to just expand upon that.
Yeah.
In future games. And yeah, I mean, like, story-wise, I'm curious to see where they go. You know, I mean, I'm fine with some of the new characters. I think Rose, I think is really exciting to, like, potentially play as Rose in RE9. Like, that could be really cool. A little, unsure. Like, I don't know how to feel about her having, like, superpowers. I guess it depends on what they are and what they would add to the game.
Right.
Just because, like, you know, I know where Resident Evil has gone in the past when it goes super crazy.
Yeah.
So I'd hope it would be reined in a little bit. I'm not, you know, I don't know. I wouldn't know until I see it. At the same time, though, there are old characters that we've not seen in a long time, and I would like to see some of them come back too. So, you know, that front, I'm curious. I'm curious to see where they take it. But I think from a gameplay perspective, like, 8 has me really excited about the future. Just the more I think about it. So.
Yeah. Is it weird? Like the first thing I thought about, even with Rose, maybe being, you know, the new protagonist, that like, and her being powerful, the first thing that came to mind was regenerating health. And I was like, oh no, like here we go. This is how they're gonna do it, like that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I feel like they could have done it with Ethan.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
and they
that's
didn't.
true.
So
yeah, that's true. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it stinks that like we're gonna be talking about this for a while. I'm in a weird conversation. I don't know if I'm all that excited about Resident Evil becoming an annualized franchise now.
So, I mean, in fairness, at least for now, like, yes, it is a yearly release.
Yeah.
But it's not like RE9 is a year out.
That's true. Yeah.
Like the next game, as rumors are to be believed, it's Revelations 3. And so that will ideally be a different cast of characters, probably some of the old guard. It'll be a different time period. And then the game after that will probably be the RE4 remake. And then the game after that will probably be RE9 if we follow that schedule. So like, I generally, like, I think I'm pretty fine with it if it's like that.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, granted, you eventually run out of remakes, so then I don't know. Like, I don't think they would bounce between Revelations and the mainline game. So I don't, you know, maybe at some point we do hit a gap, but at least if that's what the next 3 years are, like, I think I'm pretty chill with that because all three of those in general, in theory, will be fairly different.
Yeah,
even just
that's
gameplay wise, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see that. I guess I just feel like even after playing 2 and then playing 3 and then this one, it's like, I don't know, do I want another Resident Evil next year already? But of course, you know, probably this fall when we get the trailer for Revelations 3, I'm going to be like, I'm in, let's do this. Leon.
You're gonna be like, dude,
Leon
Chambers.
Yeah, like Leon and older Ashley Graham, president's daughter, we're going to be fighting through things. I don't know. But yeah, I wonder if they do like a co-op thing with Revelations 3 like they did with Revelations 2. Forgot that thing had co-op even, but maybe there's a chance they do that. But
I also wonder. So like the rumor is it's going to be on Switch exclusively.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And then PC probably later, similar to Monster Hunter Rise. I wonder. So like Revelations 2 was episodic.
Yeah.
And it released weekly, which I thought was true. I thought like I really liked that aspect of it. So I wonder. I don't think any of the rumors have pointed towards that being the case, but I wonder if they might do that again, or how successful that was for them.
Yeah.
It has been a long time since Revelations 2. Granted, there was a rumor that Village was originally Revelations 3, so who's to say?
Right.
But yeah, co-op is a good question. They also it was 2 different groups, right? So it was Moira and Claire, and then it was Barry
and the girl,
and
the little
I don't remember her name. So yeah, like lots of questions, right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, I think it's fair what you said. Like, I'm not sure if I want one next year, but like, I'm obviously like all on board. I'm like ready to go. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm bummed out. I'm gonna have to wait a few years for RE9.
Yeah, I get that for sure. And it's like another 3-4 years it's gonna be, and we're gonna be like, And then we're going to be like in 2024, you're like, remember that time we did the Resident Evil 7 and then we did the Resident Evil 8 spoilercast? And we're like, yeah, I remember that.
Yep. Come out of retirement to do one more.
We're gonna be like Chris Redfield coming out of retirement when he's gonna be old. I don't know, but yeah, I do like the aged thing with Rose. I do like that kind of thought that her body's aging or something like that faster.
Yeah, so it's either that or it's a time skip, which does bring with it its own set of things to speculate on.
Mm-hmm.
But before we go, because I think it's time to wrap up, Colin, I don't really have an answer to this, but it's something I've been thinking about. Is Resident Evil began as like zombies,
Mm-hmm.
biohazard, viruses. It's mostly zombies and then some like monsters.
Yeah.
You get to obviously the Lost Plagas, like not quite zombies, more like this like parasite kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
RE7 is mold monsters. RE8 is lichens. It's some vampires. Mostly lichens. What other monster type can they grab?
I don't know. Stone men, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
We can have like stone men. We kind of had the vampire thing there. Curtis, we're talking about monsters, but I think we're forgetting that humans are the biggest monsters. So what if RE9 is fighting humans?
That'd be the most disappointing thing.
You remember playing RE5 when you fight other zombies with guns.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I think we played that game. The game's called The Last of Us, and I think they made a sequel to that one too. So, anyways, I don't know what else they could do. I don't know if they go towards the more like animalistic kind of thing. I don't know. I always find like the old like ancient stuff to be that kind of way. Also, shout out to the credits to this game. Very RE4 with the like storybook thing on the right hand side. That like storybook art stuff. That was really cool.
Yep.
But I don't know. What else do you think about where they can go next?
One really quick thing. So it's cool with the credits. You get the second half of the Village of Shadows storybook.
Yes. Yep.
And like that's when you realize like, oh, this is mirroring Ethan's family's story.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is cool. Even like the first half, it's like directly referencing the Lords and Mother Miranda.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff's cool. I really don't know. I honestly, I'm finding it hard pressed to think of like other monster types that would make sense. I wonder if maybe with 9 they might keep with like the Metamycete and the Molded, if it's like intended to be a trilogy. I wonder if we ever go back to zombies, or maybe like Revelations 3 is more zombie focused again. I don't know. I'm curious where they go from here.
It's going to be a meteor from outer space lands.
Aliens.
And it's gonna, it's going to be the parasite, like the venom, whatever you call those parasite things or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, hopefully they're not out of... I don't think they're out of ideas per se, but... I also really want to go back and look at Not a Hero again, that DLC for 7, because I'm trying to... Because remember, like, isn't... what's his name? The brother Baker. He's like trying to contact somebody. I want to go back and see like if it's alluded to like who he's really trying to contact before Chris finds him and kills him. But
well,
I don't know.
All those questions and more. I look forward to having them answered.
In 4 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Well, Colin, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. Thanks for joining again. Hopefully, we're getting in that season. Maybe we can do some E3 predictions loosely. Different conferences that'll be coming up here and there.
Maybe once we figure out who's actually doing stuff.
Yeah, I know. Until people back out. And actually, hopefully we get some more dates other than EA and Ubisoft. We get some like Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft date announcements. Because how am I supposed to know when I'm supposed to ask off work, Curtis? How am I supposed to?
I've already requested the week off.
I know, but then I'm feeling like it's going to be the wrong week, and then it's going to get to that point where I'm like, oh, yes, this is the day. And they're like, oh, well, like 3 other people already asked off that day. And I'll be like, come on. Anyways.
Well, I've already got my time in, so.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. But, yeah, thanks again, Curtis. wish me luck on my 2 other playthroughs if I do them
Good
at
luck.
all.
You can do it.
Thank
It's
you.
doable.
Yeah.
They're not too bad.
I know, but those mercenaries, I hear that's
The mercenary modes are rough. The mainline stuff is pretty good.
Okay. Well, then of course, after I beat Resident Evil Village on PlayStation 5, I have my next game up, which is Resident Evil Village on PlayStation 4.
Got it.
Yeah. Trophies. All hail Mother Trophies. See you next time. Bye.